sad letter from a demon to whoever may find it, and a wish to follow. One morning after mowing the lawn, I found a strange crimson velvet envelope between the cracks in the ground, surrounded by an eerie pink-reddish glow. It was mesmerizing to look at. I felt drawn to it, almost like it was placed there on purpose for me to find. I always was a firm believer in the supernatural, but I never got a chance to experience it. I thought this might be a unique opportunity to see, once and for all, if there's something more to it. I thought I could finally get the answers I've been searching for my whole life. I always thought about it, and my mind was provoked by this question, by this never-ending string of dark and twisted enigmas that have always filled my soul. What were heaven and hell like? Was there a purgatory also? What if all we ever knew was fake, and not according to the reality that was beyond the veil of human perception? The more I looked at this strange envelope, the more it began to take hold of my spirit. This energy that started flowing through my body was something evil, I think. That's how it felt at first. A strange sensation of the purest evil, indescribable in human words, was dropping needles in my soul like it wanted to perform a voodoo ritual on it. My mind, body, and spirit all became weakened by this amazing and crushing force that was coming from that envelope. So I gave in to it. I let it take over. I didn't even try to fight it. My desire to see and feel the supernatural transcended my will to live. It was at this moment I knew I could find something bigger than me, bigger than humanity itself. The envelope was sealed in blood. It was signed, "To you," by an old demon. I started feeling scared, fear clouding my mind, its poisonous arms reaching within the very dark and cold abyss of my consciousness. Right under the seal, it said, "Pour your own blood over the seal to open this letter," written in minuscule letters. This raw, powerful energy was taking over me, replacing whoever I was with something anew, with something powerful and evil at the same time. But there was something else I was feeling then, some sort of guilt, sadness, of not belonging. But they were not mine. The letter was emanating them. I could feel that. I bit my finger and let blood drops fall on the seal. I felt displaced, lost in time and space forever. The letter was short, and I'll write it here verbatim because it felt very, very frightening to read. I don't know how, but I remember it word by word.
Dear human, I didn't want you to ever find this letter, let alone read it. But yet, here we are. I'm sick of it all, yet I still have to do it. It's too late for you, dear host. But I think you'll be the lucky one, the luckiest of them all. I want it to be my final time doing this. I want to wither away, to die. I want to be destroyed, obliterated into the infinite pitch black, empty and cold void. I will let you live after taking over you. Those before you never had this chance, simply because the process corrupted their mind and soul in a way that never allowed them to live anymore. You will see ugly and evil things. You will experience pain and fear you have never experienced before. Call this letter a curse for those who find it. But you will live. You will live because I will die. Before this process is complete and insanity will take over you, I will be dead. This has been going on since before I can remember, since your kind started walking the earth. I don't exactly know its final purpose, nor did I even ever bother to understand it. Simply, my kind has to do it to your kind. It's always been this way, and always will be. I know you are afraid. I know your hands are shaking while reading this. You know this is not a game, and you know there is no escape from this. All you have to do is bite your finger and pour a few drops of blood on the page. Let me show you something new. With sadness, an old demon.
I felt more and more empowered by the evil things the letter emanated. I knew this was not a joke. I signed the paper with my blood. It caught fire, its pinkish flame slowly engulfing me. I screamed in pain, but not because I was burning. It was a pain coming from the fact that I was being slowly taken to another plane, bit by bit. I faded to black in a way. I was still aware though, and when I opened my eyes, a bit of large glass tube was all that I saw. The tube seemed infinite, and the black smoke that filled it was not damaging me physically. But when that cleared, I saw twisted faces of evil beings, their shiny teeth bleeding acid spit on the glass tube. They were everywhere. Their sharp claws were scratching at the surface, trying to break in and feed. I could see the hunger in their eyes, hatred fueling whatever they held inside their minds and bodies. The deformities howled and screeched a ravenous desire to eat me. That was my last memory of being inside the tube. Right after seeing those horrifying creatures, I passed out completely. I don't know how much time I spent inside that tube. Time seemingly wasn't a thing inside it. It was just endless, infinite, darkness all around me. Coming back to my senses, I found myself in a small room. Although it was dimly lit by a flickering yellow light bulb, it was very dark. Right in front of me, there was a chair. It was wrapped in the exact same red velvet that the envelope was made of.
Please sit down,
the booming voice said, making the room tremble as if the eons that passed suddenly had a voice. A voice expressing all kinds of existential terrors and horrors that its owner had witnessed within the passing of this strange man-invented construct, time. I felt fear licking my brain, and its awful embrace kept me in place, rendering me unable to move. The fear that built up inside me was life-threatening. I knew that in a medical sense of things, a person could be scared to death. My opinion was that it wouldn't take me long to get there. Whatever was in that room with me, whatever presence loomed in the thick, damp, and heavy air, made me fear for my life. The room started shaking, and I sat down on the chair. The voice told me to close my eyes. Red flashes started running before them, even though everyone can only see darkness when they close their eyes. I heard a door opening, then closing shut. There wasn't any door when I first came here. Yet again, I was absolutely positive that the natural laws, the ones we guided our lives after, did not work here. More so, this wasn't anything natural.
Open your eyes.
The same voice once again told me. A wave of shock and horror pierced through my heart. It split my soul into halves, never to be repaired again. My mind shattered into thousands of small shards. I was no longer me. Fear took its throne inside my body. The war raged on between what I thought before and what stood in front of me now. A fiend-like shadow, its eyes burning a bright red hue, fixated on me. It was impossible to look at, yet here I was. The monstrosity stood before me as if it knew me from childhood hours, even before I was born. The smoky shadow let out a sigh, then a sad smile revealed its shiny teeth. The way its, or maybe I should say her, face contorted into something that revealed a dark, endless, and timeless sadness hit me so hard. The first thing that came to mind, the way that I could picture this sadness I was seeing, was a barren wasteland with dark clouds in the sky. Just that, endless clouds being carried away by a worn-out, weary wind above the wastelands of the fiend's former self.
Don't be scared, child. I will not hurt you, I hope,
the demon fiend said. I stood aghast, static buzzing through my skull. I always wanted to experience things like this, but not in a way where fear would invade my whole body, like a leech from hell.
You will be the last one for me, the last human I will possess before I end myself. I can't take it anymore. I chose you because you always wanted to see something that pertains to the supernatural,
the demon said, its booming voice sounding like 1,000 metallic hums and clicks overlapping each other.
I just want to talk to you a little bit before we do this.
I nodded. Shivers ran down my spine, and everything I thought I knew before was obliterated by this new experience.
This place is called the Hollow. It is an antechamber to hell. You heard that door opening and closing, yes? What lies on the other side will make you lose your mind, and it's not even hell itself behind it.
She sighed, a deep, dark sadness escaping her mouth. I nodded. The fear that was reigning supreme inside me didn't let me speak yet. The Hollow was a place where all soon-to-be possessed people go. There, they could sit face to face with the demon that would take over their body. Some of them would tell secrets and forbidden knowledge. Others would say nothing at all. They could show you other worlds, or just mock, hurt, and eventually possess you like you were nothing. I think the common thing for all people who have been inside this room was fear. A deep, unending, seething fear.
I need you to help carry me to a place where I will kill myself. There we will find a pool where I will drown, because I am tired,
the demon said. I finally got my voice back. I was fearful. This is not how I wanted to find out about the existence of the supernatural. I didn't want my first experience with it to be me being a vessel for a suicidal demon. The Hollow started to tremble, and the demon told me we needed to hurry. The process will be painful, and fear would probably leave eternal marks and scars on my mind.
Are you ready, child?
The demon asked me. I nodded, tears filling my eyes. She crashed into my chest like a rifle had just been emptied inside me. The pain was an eternal flame of hate, a superior being that transcended everything I knew before. The fiend spread itself across my whole body and took over me. Soon, She dictated all my actions and movements. My train of thought wasn't my own anymore. I became a prisoner. The purple door appeared in front of me. I let out a scream inside my own mind, only for it to be swallowed whole by the demon's voice.
I will shield you from the insanity. You will be all right. Let's go to the pool,
she finally said. The door opened and a black, long corridor was revealed. It was similar in a way to the tube in which my travel here was done. Men and women were plastered all over its walls. The demon told me that her higher-ups sometimes got off on gluing sinners on the wall, especially murderers, rapists, and pedophiles. Their never-ending screams would echo into eternity, to which they had been condemned. Cries for help and screams of anguish filled the corridor. The absence of light was not a problem for me. I could see through the demon's eyes, all the way to the end of this black, horizontal place, fit only for beasts and former human psychopaths. What made this new sight special was that it looked like I had a fire in my eyes. Don't know how to better explain it. Like when you look through a fire and see on the other side. That's exactly what it was.
We need to hurry. He knows something's happening.
The demon screamed inside my brain. Who knows? I asked, fear breaking my mind's voice.
You know who,
she said. I started running, although I was not in control anymore. I ran and ran and ran. It felt like an eternity. We reached another door. It was ancient and the wood was cracked. A howl, followed by a deep groan, echoed throughout the corridor behind me, silencing every scream that came from those sinners trapped in the wall. I heard the behemoth rampaging towards me, and not even for a second did I dare turn my head around and see what or who it was. I didn't, because deep down inside, I knew who he was. I opened the door, and a bright white light hit me in the face. I was temporarily blinded by this powerful beam, but soon came back to it.
Run!
The demon cried. A circular construction made of stone was taking shape as I was approaching it. Water filled it, colored black. It moved unnatural, as all things were here. Droplets of dark water rose in the air, dancing under the silvery sky above me. A dark red sun split into four was bleeding its core in the air, regenerating itself infinitely. Skeletal birds were flying in the sky, their screams of hateful spite making my soul shake. Trees made out of teeth were chattering when touched by the infernal winds of this place.
This is a demon graveyard. The ones who die are buried here. That water over there is sometimes used for healing, other times for inflicting pain upon those who do not follow orders. White is for healing, black for pain,
the demon said. She told me to part my skin because the dark water needed blood. The crimson liquid was caught, almost like it was eaten by floating dark water droplets. Then they collapsed into the pool. Hitting it like a giant rock was dropped from the hell's heavens. A sort of maelstrom was formed, and I looked inside but saw no end. It looked like a bottomless pit. I saw only dead bodies, grotesque skeletons, and horns filling the void, floating around in the endless space like discarded carcasses of evil.
We need to jump. You'll be back to your world, safe. I want this to be my grave, my eternal home,
she sighed right before I leaped. I felt her leave my body, almost like something from the void pulled her out of me. She was floating, still alive.
Thank you for your help,
she said, her final words carrying feelings of relief and regret. Two long arms extended from the blackness and kept her in place. They ripped her into two, an explosion of bright light filling the void for a second. It blinded me, and I fainted. I woke up back on the steps of my house. A ringing sound filled my head, and I could still hear the screams of those plastered people from the dark corridor. The mark on my hand was still there. The bloodied scratch still showed. I think about it even to this day. What I experienced was borderline insane, but it was only a small part of the things we don't know. I got my wish fulfilled by fulfilling a demon's wish. The things I saw will haunt me forever. The subsequent fear emerging from those events is eternally embedded in me, like a tattoo made of darkness. I wonder, what else is out there that we can't see? I Was Gone for Hours by Darkheroxx. I'm a homebody. I could stay in my room browsing the internet for hours, and I'd be perfectly content with my life. My friends Tom and Brittany, on the other hand, are always up to something. I joke that they have enough energy to spend that they don't need me around, but they find a way to drag me out of my hole. We've been friends ever since we were kids, and whenever they force me to tag along on their hikes, despite my constant groaning, I'm always happy to be with them. My friends would usually fight with me whenever they bring up an activity that required me to go outside, but I bring my foot down when it comes to water. When I was a kid, I almost drowned at the beach. My tiny body got caught up in the waves, and my mom wasn't able to get to me. Thank God a group of teenagers were close by, and one of them was able to get me to safety. Ever since then, I just stayed away from water. So when Tom had brought up the idea of kayaking, it was no one's surprise to hear my answer was a hard no. A couple days passed as my phone was being barraged, this time with text messages assuring that it'll be so much fun and it would be lame without you around. It was the day before the trip when I caved in, not because my friends were constantly begging me, but they had invited my crush. I know, it sounds extremely lame, but I really liked this girl that Brittany knew. So I very reluctantly grew a pair and agreed to go kayaking. The next morning, we all packed into Brittany's car and made the hour trek to the river. When we got there, we were able to rent some kayaks. Usually, there would be some that could have 2 people in them, but to my dismay, there were only the singles. Great. I looked at the river while putting on my life vest, preparing myself to not drown. The water didn't seem that deep, so I thought maybe things would be okay. Brittany, Tom, and my crush were experienced, and were able to get in their kayaks with ease. I, on the other hand, had struggles for a few minutes, so I lagged behind a bit. I had absolutely no idea what I was doing, but the kayak was steady, and I copied the others as they were moving ahead of me. They must not have noticed that I was getting further behind, and I was cursing myself that I was actually doing something like this. After a few minutes, I seemed to be getting the hang of it, so it wasn't all bad, though it really sucked not being with the rest of my group. The waters were calm, so I was able to move with ease, and my disdain turned into cockiness as I thought I was doing well for my first time. I looked ahead to see there was a turn ahead. My friends were out of sight, so I paddled a bit faster to catch up. My heart sank when I took the left turn to see a long stretch of empty water. The river went on and on, with no signs of another soul. There was no way they had just disappeared. I was only a few minutes behind, right? That's when I noticed how quiet it was. There was no sound of anyone, no rustling of the leaves from the wind, and the water beneath me was dead silent. I looked down the river. The water, once a beautiful shade of blue, was now a dark and murky green. There were no ripples upon the water's surface, and I realized that the kayak was stopped dead in its tracks. I thought perhaps I was just overthinking things, and my group was just further off than I thought. But as I looked forward to the long stretch of empty water, I wasn't sure what else to think. I gripped my paddle and forced myself forward. That was all I could do. I paddled through the murky water. There was a resistance as if I was moving them through a thick sludge. A few minutes passed and my arms were already aching, but I had to catch up to my friends. Was I even going anywhere? I looked around. All the trees were the same, and there were no identifiable marks for me to even know if I was moving at all. Fuck! Fuck! I cursed to myself as I frantically tried to push myself forward. The water felt thicker and heavier as I moved the paddle through it. I pushed and I pushed as hard as I could, until suddenly, the right side of the paddle was stuck in the water. I slowly looked down. I couldn't see anything beneath the cloudy green water, and the right side of my paddle was completely submerged. My arms were already out of strength. I tried my best to yank the paddle out of the water, but it wouldn't budge. I heard a noise that broke through the absolute silence I was trapped in. A very light tapping coming from underneath me. Thump, 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 thump. The noise was drumming underneath the entirety of my kayak. Then I felt my body jolt as I began to sink. No, the kayak wasn't sinking. Something was pulling me down into the depths. The paddle pulled away from my grip and I saw hands, bloated, gray hands, reaching from the water and onto the edges of my kayak. I let out a scream as I watched the hands grip onto the kayak and pulling me into the water. I had nowhere to go and there was nothing else I could do. It all happened in seconds, but it felt like an eternity as I slowly turned and my body began to crash into the river. My face crashed through the water. My eyes stung and my skin burned. The water was so freezing cold. I looked around and realized that I wasn't alone after all. I was surrounded by bodies of all ages, all sizes, bloated bodies of men and women. All of them were reaching out towards me. I felt something grab onto my ankle, and in my horror I saw a small, childlike hand gripping onto me. I looked into the dead and cloudy eyes of what looked like a young girl. Her face twisted into a visage of agony as she began to climb up my leg. Then another set of hands, then another. Despite me wearing a life vest, I was being pulled further and further down. I finally lost it. I kicked my legs and waved my arms in an attempt to pull myself back up, but now their arms were wrapped around my waist. I lost my breath, and I looked up to see the bubbles float upwards towards my escape. My ears began to pop as I sank deeper and deeper. My body felt so cold and my chest ached as water began to flow into me. I saw a young girl, a teenage boy, an older woman, and a middle-aged man gripping onto my torso, and I noticed that not only were they pulling me down, they were using me to swim back up. I watched as their bodies began to float upwards and my vision began to fade to black as I dropped deeper into this watery hell. Next thing I knew, I was face up floating on the water, looking up towards that damn cloudy sky. I felt sick when I moved an inch, water began to pour out of my throat. I heard someone calling my name, and I saw my friends on a small speedboat shouting at me. I was pulled out of the water and was immediately sped towards a hospital. A few hours later, after I was checked out by a doctor, Tom explained that I had gone missing, and when they turned around, they saw my kayak floating, completely empty. They spent hours looking for me up and down the river, but they couldn't find a trace of me. They reached the end and even called the police, but they couldn't find me until those last moments. I didn't tell them what happened to me, what I think happened to me, because quite frankly, they wouldn't believe me. It's been a crazy couple of weeks since then, and I think I might rethink that thought. I thought I was going crazy. I thought that I really, truly lost it until I started having dreams. Since that day, I've been having nightmares of the river, and I feel myself drowning. Then, when I wake up, I'm completely drenched in cold water. Just the other night, after I jumped out of bed and sat in a corner, thinking that I had finally snapped, I saw people staring back at me from across my bedroom. A young girl, a teenage boy, an older woman, and a middle-aged man. Their bodies were bloated and decayed, dripping river water on the floor. Beeson Street by Zachary Gale. I'm not sure I should be writing this. Hell, I'm not even sure I should continue thinking about it, but I can't stop. Last weekend, I was driving to my grandma's to meet my family for a late dinner. She lives in a cabin in a remote area of Dwagniak, maybe 40 minutes away from my work. It was mid-November and around 6:30 p.m., so the sun was going down as I pulled my pickup out of the parking lot. I've always loved this drive. I would see so many animals as a kid, and there was a swamp if we took a certain route. The full trees made a tall canopy from which the sunlight streamed through in focused beams, and the dense, dark woods always seemed full of adventure and hidden dangers. The fall and winter were always the best though. The changing leaves were always stunning, and the pile of leaves you could jump in were enormous. And the snow in the winter would cling to the trees, and the plows would almost make the long dirt road outside of Grandma's into a half-pipe that was great to use a sled on. But on this particular night, no such joy would be had. I turned onto Beeson Street, a mere 10 minutes from the cabin, as the sun finally set and darkness settled in. No Time by the Guess Who was playing through my speakers. My headlights made the largely bare trees seem like they were made of bone. I began to reminisce about looking out the window when I was a kid, and imagining some of my favorite cartoon or video game characters running or flying through the woods, fighting and dodging trees. I snapped out of this memory and looked at my clock, panicked. I'd only been on Beeson for 2 minutes, but it had felt far longer. I shook my head and refocused on the road. Trees went by in a blur, and my tires rumbled on the cold, packed earth of the road. Dry leaves blew across the road before being swept up in the wake of my truck and getting tangled in the tall, dead grasses. The sky above was filled with stars, far more stars than I'd normally see in the densely populated town I lived in. The stars seemed to move just slightly too fast, as though they were streaking across the ebon sky, but I was only going 30 miles per hour. I turned my attention back to the road and found it was like a dark tunnel. The skeletal trees reached up like hands trying to grasp the heaven. The fingers curled over the road itself, the road with its maw-like edges and inky blackness ahead. I stared into the darkness. Somewhere in the back of my head, I had registered that my radio had changed from Rush's Distant Early Warning to Pink Floyd's Breathe. The road ahead seemed to stretch forever into the void as the rest of the world appeared to zoom in. In that void, I saw the outline of a shape, somehow darker than the emptiness that surrounded it. I jumped and hit my brakes. They squealed as I came to a hard stop. Panting, I stared ahead. There was nothing. After gathering myself, I took a look at the clock. 6:53. Only 1 minute had passed, but that couldn't be right. I had listened to multiple songs since turning onto Beeson Street. I looked around at the forest. It no longer felt like the woods I knew. It felt denser, darker, more knowing. I hit the gas and started driving. I needed to get to my grandma's. Maybe the clock was broken, but that meant I should be close. I wanted to spend as little time on the wooded road as possible. As I drove, shapes began to appear in the forest. They almost looked like naked people dancing, but they disappeared every time they went behind a tree. Their faces were twisted, misshapen things. I did my best not to look at them and just focus on the road. The radio played song after song. Inagata da Vida by Iron Butterfly, White Rabbit by Jefferson Airplane, Tomorrow Never Knows by the Beatles. The clock changed to 6:54. I must have passed the driveway. I tried to do a U-turn, but the road was too narrow. As I shifted into reverse, I accidentally turned out my lights, plunging me into darkness and panic. I fumbled in the dark, trying to find the light lever by the light of the moon in front of me. Once I found it, light flooded the forest in front of me. Dozens of deer stood in the forest facing away from me. Slowly, they turned their heads toward me in unison. Their eyes seemed to glow, and they all seemed off. Some deer were missing an eye, or had too many. Others just had their faces mixed up, or had a neck, jaw, or leg that was slightly too long or too short. Behind them was where the moon had been a moment before. Then, like a giant eye, the moon reappeared, with a second next to it. I was frozen in place until the deer took a step toward me. Then I turned the wheel and floored it. The clock said 6:56. Tearing down the dirt road, I could see the deer leaping through the trees. Some of them ran on 4 legs, others, 2, with vaguely human arms dangling at their sides. Their heads lolled limply on their necks, tongues hanging out, and dead eyes that always seemed trained on me. I pushed the gas pedal down further, rocketing down the road for what felt like hours. All the while the deer followed and warped, becoming monstrous and distended. Their limbs flailed with too many joints. The clock said 6:57, and the radio began to blare, the end by the doors. The deer funneled into the road ahead of me, obscuring my sight as a swirling, writhing mass of flesh and leaves. I watched in horror as the mass parted and the moon eyes loomed ahead, towering over a void. I couldn't stop. Jim Morrison sang, "Ride the King's Highway, baby." The clock said 6:59. I awoke in my truck sometime later. It was still running on the dark dirt road. I rubbed my face and felt stubble, but I'd shaved before work. Just ahead of me was my grandmother's mailbox and driveway. I looked around and saw no deer. The end still played on the radio. The final lyrics sent chills up my spine. I switched the radio off. The clock said 7. Eternal Abyss by Charlie Blackmoore. I hear the hellbirds chirping, singing their songs, when I open my eyes to see the stone-cold walls. I hear the songs day and night, even when the hellfires aren't burning so bright. I miss the earth with a cool spring breeze. I miss the nights where everything was unseen. I miss my wife with her uncanny banter. I miss my children with their witty laughter. And I miss my friends who loved me so, even though I knew things wouldn't forever go. The hot volcanic-like air blows into the 4-walled cell I am stuck in, burning the skin, bubbling it until it bursts, melting it right off my chest. I awake to the calling of the skeleton birds. 6 o'clock in the morning of my 1000th day in hell. I stand up from the bed made of bones. Uncomfortable bastard. I make my way into the stone-walled bathroom to do my business before the hellfires start to spew molten. The skeleton guards stand at their posts just outside the barred door, while the other prisoners plead to be let go. I gave up on begging to be let out of the cell about 500 days ago. It was useless to plead for my life when I knew that I would never get out of this place. My cellmate, Nate, is still sound asleep despite all the screams echoing throughout the dusty old chamber. I kick the edge of the bed, causing him to stir. "What the hell, Sutton?" he angrily growls. "Who is Sutton?" I raise my eyebrows. Nate groggily sits up in his bed and looks at me with a weird expression. You are?" "No, I'm sociopathic. I always have been." "Okay, so you're delusional now. That's great." Nate sighs. "Delusional? Nate, you've been here for 1,000 days just like I have. Don't pretend like you have no idea who I am." "You are L.W. Sutton, a writer." "Perhaps I tend to dabble in writing from time to time, but my name has always been Sociopathic Pasta. I really don't understand what the hell's gotten into you, but it's freaking me out." I shake my head. I've shared a cell with Nate for 1,000 days. How could he forget who I am? My name is Sociopathic Pasta. I dabbled in writing during my time on Earth. My normal career was some bullshit 9-to-5 job that I honestly hated, but my joy was making videos on YouTube. I had over 20,000 subscribers to my channel before my world turned black. I honestly don't remember much about what happened in order to land me in hell. However, I do remember being angry enough to hurt someone, and they fought back in self-defense. I remember waking up to the sound of bells chiming, birds calling, and someone standing over me. Look, I feel like all of this is redundant in a way, so I will cut to the important part of my time in hell. I used to be tortured every day, but now I do the torturing. I have quickly climbed up the chain of command in this awful fucking place. I get to watch the terror in people's eyes as I use the hand-carved knife to pierce the soft flesh of men. I watch with joy as tears fall down their cheeks because of the pain I am inflicting. I am a sociopath, and God, do I love it. It doesn't matter where I go or how much I torture people, because at the end of the day, the realization sinks in that I am still trapped in this eternal abyss. The Monkey's Paw. Outside, the night was cold and wet, but in the small living room of Laburnum Villa, the blinds were closed and the fire burned brightly. Father and son played chess. The father knew radical strategies and put his king into enough danger to earn comment from the white-haired old lady knitting peacefully by the fire. "Listen to the wind," Mr. White said, seeing a fatal mistake and wanting to prevent his son from noticing. "I'm listening," the son said, grimly surveying the board as he stretched out his hand. "Check." "I should hardly think he'd come tonight," the father said, hand poised over the board. "Mate," the son replied. "That's the worst part about living so far out. Of all the beastly, slushy, out-of-the-way places to live, this is the worst. The pathway is a bog and the road's a disaster. I don't know what people are thinking. I suppose because only 2 houses on the road are occupied, they think it doesn't matter." Mr. White yelled with sudden, unprovoked anger. "Never mind, dear. Perhaps you'll win the next one," his wife soothed. Mr. White looked up sharply, just in time to see a knowing glance between mother and son. The words died away on his lips, and he hid a guilty grin in his thin gray beard. "There he is," the son said as the gate banged loudly, and heavy footsteps approached the door. The old man rose to open the door with friendly haste and was heard sympathizing with the guest. The guest complained so much that Mrs. White said, "Tut-tut," coughing gently as her husband entered with a tall, burly man with beady eyes and a pink complexion. "Sergeant Major Morris," he said, introducing himself. The sergeant major shook hands, sat by the fire, and watched contentedly as his host poured whiskey and put a small copper kettle on the fire. With the third glass, his eyes got brighter, and he eagerly began telling a story about a visitor from distant lands. He squared his broad shoulders in the chair and spoke of wild events and brave deeds of war, plagues, and strange people. 21 years of it. When he went away, he was a thin youth in the warehouse. Now look at him, Mr. White said, nodding at his wife and son. "He doesn't seem to have taken much damage," Mrs. White said politely. "I'd like to go to India myself, just to look around a bit, you know," the old man said. "Better off where you are," the sergeant major said, shaking his head. He put down the empty glass, sighing softly before shaking it again. "I would like to see those old temples, mystics, and jugglers. What was it you started telling me the other day about a monkey's paw or something, Morris?" the old man asked. "Nothing, at least nothing worth hearing," the soldier replied hastily. "Monkey's paw?" Miss White asked curiously. "Well, it's just a bit of what you might call magic, perhaps," the sergeant major said offhandedly. His 3 listeners eagerly leaned forward. The soldier absent-mindedly put his empty glass to his lips then sat it down again. His host filled it for him. To look at it, it's just an ordinary little paw, dried as a mummy, the sergeant major said, fumbling in his pocket. He removed something and held it out. Miss White drew back with a grimace, but her son took it, examining it curiously. And what is special about it? Mr. White inquired as he took it from his son. After examining it, he placed it on the table. An old mystic put a spell on it, a very holy man. He wanted to show fate ruled people's lives, and that those who interfered with it did so to their sorrow. He put a spell on it so that 3 separate men could have 3 wishes from it, the sergeant major explained. His manner was so serious, the family became aware that their laughter bothered him somewhat. Well, why don't you have 3, sir? The son joked. The soldier regarded him in the way that middle age tends to regard presumptuous youth. I have, he whispered, his blotchy face whitened. And did you really have the 3 wishes granted? Mrs. White asked. I did, the sergeant major answered, and his glass tapped against his teeth. And has anybody else wished? The old lady persisted. The first man had 3 wishes, yes. I don't know what the first 2 were, but the third was for death. That's how I got the paw. The soldier answered in tones so grave a hush fell over the group. If you've had your 3 wishes, it's no good to you anymore, Morris. What do you keep it for? The old man finally asked. The soldier shook his head. Fancy, I suppose, he said slowly. I did think of selling it, but I don't think I will. It has caused enough mischief already. Besides, people won't buy it. Some think it's a fairy tale, and then those who think anything of it want to try it first and pay me after. If you could have another 3 wishes, would you use them? The old man asked, eyeing him keenly. I don't know, said the soldier. I don't know. He took the paw, dangling it between his forefinger and thumb, and suddenly threw it into the fire. Mr. White, with a slight cry, stooped down and snatched it out. Better to let it burn, the soldier said solemnly. If you don't want it, Morris, give it to me, Mr. White said. I won't. I threw it on the fire. If you keep it, don't blame me for what happens. Throw it in the fire again like a sensible man, the soldier said grimly. Mr. White shook his head and examined his new possession closely. How do you do it? He asked. Hold it up in your right hand and say the wish out loud. But I warn you of the consequences, the sergeant major said. Sounds like the Arabian Nights. Do you think you might wish for 4 pairs of hands for me? Mrs. White joked as she rose to set the supper. Her husband drew the talisman from his pocket, and all 3 of them burst into laughter as the sergeant major, looking alarmed, caught him by the arm. If you must wish for something sensible, he said gruffly. Mr. White dropped it back in his pocket, placed the chairs, and motioned his friend to the table. During supper, the talisman was partly forgotten. Afterward, the 3 sat fascinated, listening to a second installment of the soldier's adventures in India. If the tale about the monkey's paw is exaggerated as those he had been telling us, we won't make much of it, the son joked, closing the door behind their guests who had to catch the last train. Did you give him anything for it? Mrs. White inquired, regarding her husband closely. A little. He didn't want it, but I made him take it. He again urged me to throw away the paw. The old man admitted, blushing slightly. Not likely. Why, we're going to be rich, famous, and happy. Start by wishing to be an emperor, father. Then you can't be ordered around by mother. He darted around the table, chased by the angry Mrs. White, who was armed with a rag. Mr. White took the paw from his pocket and eyed it suspiciously. I don't know what to wish for, and that's a fact, he said slowly. It seems to me I've got all I want. If you only paid off the house, you'd be quite happy, wouldn't you? Well, wish for 200 pounds then. That'll just do it, the son suggested, his hand on his father's shoulder. The father, smiling shamefully at his indulgence, held up the talisman. His son sat down at the piano and struck a few impressive chords, his face solemn as he winked at his mother. "I wish for 200 pounds, the old man said clearly. A fine crash from the piano greeted the words, interrupted by a shuddering cry from the old man. His wife and son ran toward him. "It moved. As I wished, it twisted in my hand like a snake," he cried, looking at the object on the floor with disgust. "Well, I don't see the money, and I better never shall," his son said, picking up and placing it on the table. "It must have been your imagination," his wife suggested, regarding him anxiously. He shook his head. "Well, never mind. There's no harm done, but it gave me a shock all the same." They sat down by the fire again while the two men finished their pipes. Outside, the wind grew higher than ever, and the old man jumped nervously at the sound of a door banging upstairs. An unusual and depressing silence settled upon all three, lasting until the couple retired for the night. "I expect you'll find the cash in a big bag in the middle of your bed, and something horrible squatting on the top of the wardrobe, watching you pocket your ill-gotten gains," the son joked as he said goodnight. The old man sat alone in the darkness, gazing at the dying fire and seeing faces in it. The last face was so horribly ape-like. He gazed at it in amazement. It got so vivid, he felt for a glass of water to throw over it. His hand grasped the monkey's paw, and with a little shiver, he wiped his hand on his coat and went to bed. Next morning, as the bright winter sun shone over the breakfast table, he laughed at his fears. There was a dull wholesomeness about the room that it lacked the previous night. The dirty, shriveled little paw was placed carelessly on the mantel, doing little to inspire belief in its powers. "I suppose all old soldiers are the same. I can't believe we listen to such nonsense. How could wishes be granted these days? And if they could, how could 200 pounds hurt you?" Mrs. White said. "Might drop on his head from the sky?" the son said sarcastically. Morris said things that happened so naturally you could call it coincidence if you wanted, the father said. "Well, don't spend the money before I get back. I'm afraid it'll turn you into a mean, greedy man, and we will have to disown you," the son said as he rose from the table. His mother laughed, followed him to the door, and watched them down the road. Returning to the breakfast table, she laughed at her husband's credulity. Though this did not prevent her from rushing to the door at the mailman's knock, nor from rudely referring to the retired sergeant major's drinking habits when the mail included a tailor's bill. "I expect our son will have more of his funny jokes when he comes home," she said as they sat at dinner. "I dare say, but aside from all that, the thing moved in my hand, that I'll swear to," Mr. White said, pouring himself a beer. "You thought it did," the old lady soothed. "I say it did. There was no mistake. I had just—" "What's the matter?" replied the husband. His wife made no reply. She was watching the mysterious movements of a man outside. He was looking at the house with uncertainty, as if trying to decide whether to enter. Thinking of the 200 pounds, she noticed the stranger was well dressed and wore a new, glossy silk hat. 3 times he paused at the gate before walking away again. The 4th time he stood with his hand on it. Then, with a sudden resolution, flung it open and walked up the path. At the same moment, Miss White hurriedly removed her apron, placing it beneath her chair. She brought the uneasy stranger into the room. He stared at her nervously, listening impatiently as the old lady apologized for the appearance of the room and her husband's garden coat. She then tried to wait patiently for him to explain his visit, but at first he was strangely silent. "I was asked to call. I come from Ma and Megan's," he finally said, stooping to pick up a piece of cotton from his trousers. The old lady started. "Is anything the matter? Has anything happened to my son? What is it? What is it?" she asked breathlessly. Her husband interrupted. There, sit down and don't jump to conclusions. I'm sure you haven't brought bad news, sir," he said hastily, eyeing the man wistfully. "I'm sorry," began the visitor, Is he hurt? The woman demanded wildly. The visitor bowed in confirmation. Badly hurt, but he is not in any pain, he said quietly. Oh, thank God, the woman said, clasping her hands. Thank God for that, She broke off suddenly as she understood his sinister meaning and saw the awful confirmation in the man's averted face. She caught her breath, turned to her slower-witted husband, and laid her trembling hand upon his. There was a long silence. He was caught in the machinery, the visitor explained in a low voice. Caught in the machinery, Mr. White repeated, dazed. Yes. He sat, staring blankly out the window. Taking his wife's hand between his, he pressed it as he had in their old courting days, nearly 40 years ago. He was the only one left to us. It is hard, he said gently, turning to the visitor. The man coughed as he stood and walked slowly to the window. The firm wished me to convey their sincere sympathy with you and your great loss, he said without looking around. I beg you to understand I am only their servant and merely obeying orders. There was no reply. The woman's face was white, her eyes staring and her breath inaudible. The husband's face wore the same look the sergeant might have carried into his first battle. I was to say that Ma and Megan's deny all responsibility, the man continued. They admit no liability at all, but in consideration of your son's services, they wish to pay you compensation. Mr. White dropped his wife's hands, rose to his feet, and gazed at the visitor with a look of horror. His dry lips shaped the words, how much? 200 pounds was the answer. Unconscious of his wife's shriek, the old man smiled faintly, put his hands out like a blind man, and dropped to the floor in a senseless heap. In the huge new cemetery 2 miles away, the old people buried their dead and returned to a house filled of shadow and silence. It was all over so quickly they could hardly accept it at first. They kept expecting something else to happen, something to lighten the load that was too heavy for old hearts to bear. But the days passed and the expectation gave place to resignation, the hopeless resignation of the old, sometimes mistaken for apathy. Sometimes they hardly said a word because now they had nothing to talk about. Their days were long and weary. It was about a week after this old man woke suddenly in the night, stretching out his hand to find himself alone. The room was in darkness and the sound of muffled crying came from the window. He sat up and listened. Come back to bed. You will be cold, he said tenderly. It is colder for my son, the old woman said, weeping more. The sound of her sobs died away in his ears. The bed was warm and his eyes were heavy. He dozed fitfully, then slept until his wife's sudden, wild cry woke him with a start. The paw! She cried wildly. The monkey's paw! He jumped up in alarm. Where is it? What's the matter? She came stumbling across the room. I want it, she said quietly. You haven't destroyed it? It's in the den, on the mantel, he replied in wonder. Why? She cried and laughed together, bending over to kiss his cheek. I just thought of it, she said hysterically. Why didn't I think of it before? Why didn't you think of it? Think of what? He questioned. The other 2 wishes. We only had one, she replied rapidly. Was that not enough? He demanded fiercely. No, we'll have one more. Go get it quickly and wish our boy alive again, she cried triumphantly. The man sat up, flinging the sheets from his quaking limbs. Good God, are you mad? He cried, horrified. Get it quickly and wish. Oh, my boy, she panted. Her husband struck a match to light the candle. Get back to bed. You don't know what you're saying, he said unsteadily. We had the first wish granted. Why not the second? The old woman argued feverishly. A coincidence, the old man stammered. Go get it and wish, his wife cried, quivering with excitement. The old man turned, regarding her, and his voice shook. He has been dead for 10 days, and besides, I didn't want to tell you, but I could only recognize him by his clothing. If he was too terrible for you to see then, how about now? Bring him back! Do you think I fear the child I nursed? The old woman cried, dragging him toward the door. He went into the darkness, feeling his way to the den, and then to the mantel. The talisman was there, and before he could escape the room, he was seized with a horrible fear. The unspoken wish might bring his mutilated son to him. Catching his breath, he realized he could not find the exit. With the creepy thing in hand, and his brow cold with sweat, he felt his way around the table, groping along the wall until he found the small door. Even his wife's face changed as he entered the room. It was white, expected, and seemed to have an unnatural look upon it. He was afraid of her. "Wish!" she cried in a strong voice. "It is foolish and wicked." He hesitated. "Wish!" his wife repeated. He raised his hand. "I wish my son alive again." The talisman fell to the floor and he regarded it fearfully. Then he sank into a chair, trembling. With burning eyes, the old woman walked to the window and raised the blinds. He sat until chilled by the cold, occasionally glancing at the woman looking out the window. The candle burned below the rim of the candlestick, throwing pulsating shadows on the ceiling and walls until it expired with the last flicker. The old man felt an unspeakable sense of relief at the talisman's failure and crept back to bed. A minute or two later, the old woman followed, silently, without emotion. Neither spoke, but lay there listening to the ticking of the clock. A stair creaked, and a squeaky mouse scurried noisily through the wall. The darkness was oppressive. After working up his courage for some time, he struck a match and went downstairs for a candle. At the foot of the stairs, the match went out, and he paused to light another. At the same moment, a quiet and stealthily knock sounded at the door. The matches fell from his hand, spilling to the floor. He stood motionless, not breathing until the knock was repeated. Then he turned swiftly and fled to his room, closing the door behind him. A third knock sounded through the house. "What's that?" the old woman cried, sitting up. "A rat," the old man said in shaking tones. "A rat. It passed me on the stairs." His wife sat up, listening. A loud knock echoed through the house. "It's our son!" she screamed. "It's our son!" She ran to the door, but her husband arrived first, catching her by the arm and holding her tightly. "What are you going to do?" he whispered hoarsely. "It's my boy!" she cried, struggling mechanically. "I forgot it was 2 miles away. What are you holding me for? Let go! I must open the door." "For God's sake, don't let it in," the old man cried, trembling. "You're afraid of our own son? Let me go! I'm coming, son! I'm coming!" she cried, struggling. There was another knock at the door, and another. The old woman broke free with a sudden twist and ran from the room. Her husband followed to the landing, calling after her, pleading as she hurried down the stairs. He heard the chain rattle and the bottom bolt slide slowly and stiffly from the socket. Then the old woman's voice strained and panting. "The bolt!" she cried loudly. "Come down! I can't reach it!" But her husband was on his hands and knees, groping wildly on the floor in search of the paw. If he could only find it before that thing got in. A barrage of knocks reverberated through the house, and he heard the scraping of a chair as his wife put it against the door. He heard the creaking of the bolt as it came back slowly, and at the same moment he found the monkey's paw, frantically breathing his third and last wish. The knocking stopped suddenly, although the echoes of it were still in the house. He heard the chair removed and the door open. A cold wind rushed up the staircase, and his wife's long, loud wail of disappointment gave him the courage to run past her, to the gate. The flickering street lamp shone on a quiet and deserted road. Saying that Harold Martin was a big man was like saying the Titanic was a big boat. Harold gave new meaning to the term massive, but it was a mistake to think that he had worked at building his formidable stature. One glance at his shaggy, tousled hair and his long, bushy beard told you right away that Harold didn't care much how he looked. Spending 5 minutes with the man, and you could tell that Harold didn't care much about anything. Anything, that is, except money. Money was exactly what was on Harold's mind that morning. It was 8:30 a.m. on December 24th, Christmas Eve. Any special significance of the holiday was entirely wasted on Harold. The fact that it was a holiday was all that mattered to him. Holidays earned him triple pay for every hour he could pull, and he had just finished 16. The best part was still ahead. He was looking forward to 2 more days of big money. This week's paycheck was gonna be a killer. Maybe he would pick up that stereo he had seen down at the mall, the one with the speakers that were almost as big as he was. Man, that sure would get that dweeb in the apartment next door pissed. Harold smiled his crooked smile as he thought about that puny little Todd Herschel pounding on the wall, trying to make Harold stop, while he just turned up the tunes one more notch and gobbled down another Twinkie. As Harold rounded a turn in the winding country road that led home, his peaceful reverie shattered. The engine in his old pickup sputtered twice, wheezed painfully, and then shut off with a sharp, metallic clank. The final clank melted the grin off Harold's face and replaced with a visage of pure, unadulterated rage. Demons in the deepest, darkest sub-basement of hell would have gleefully done cartwheels into the lake of fire rather than face Harold as he climbed out of his truck.
Ah, you giant pile of tick turd. Damn it, just what I need. You couldn't break down on a normal day. No, you had to break down on a fucking holiday.
Harold began kicking the truck's side, his steel-toed safety boots leaving large dents in the already rust-pitted body panels. All the while, a hot steam of profanity flowed from his mouth, making the air around him shimmer with its intensity. Finally, Harold got control of himself. His anger was no less severe, but he turned it inward to smolder and fume in the furnace of his chest. He began to walk down the road, looking for a house that he could find a phone. He'd call a cab, and when he got home, he'd call Jimmy Bird. He promised himself for the 100th time that he'd get Birdman to tow that piece of crap down to the junkyard and put it in that car crusher thing he had. This time, he imagined himself pulling the switch, and that would free him forever from the truck's fickleness. It was cold. Snow had fallen 3 days ago, and still some clung to the shade-covered ground along the road. The weatherman had cheerfully predicted more snow was on the way, bringing a white Christmas again this year. To Harold, it just looked like the woods had a bad case of dandruff. By the time he reached the mailbox that read Barlow in childish scrawled letters, his breath was coming in great steaming puffs. He couldn't see the house, but a dirt driveway led into the woods. Somebody'd be home. If they weren't, he'd just break a window, use the phone, and be gone before they got back. His crooked smile slid back onto his face as he made his way up the drive. The house at the end of the drive was old, and it appeared that the owner cared as little about its upkeep as Harold cared about his own. The white paint had faded to gray, and was peeling in more than a few places. One of the upstairs windows was boarded up, making Harold feel like it was winking at him as he approached. Weeds poked through the snow that still remained in the front yard. There was obviously someone at home.
Must be a party,
Harold thought as he stepped up to the front door and knocked. He barely rapped twice when the door swung open, revealing a short, very plump old woman, drying her hands on her apron. She smiled warmly.
Thomas, what in the world took you so long? Good gracious, you're near about frozen solid. Get on in here and warm yourself up.
She grabbed Harold's arm and led him down the hall into a crowded living room. It was a big room, but the dozen or so adults and 6 or 7 children that it already contained made the room look ready to burst at the seams. And it was so warm.
Look who's here, everybody,
the old woman said as she gently pushed Harold forward.
It's Thomas. He finally decided to show up.
Harold hadn't realized how cold he had gotten during his trek to the house. Now the fireplace drew him like a magnet.
I need to use your phone for a minute, but I'd like to warm myself up a little first. But my name's not Thomas. It's Harold.
Oh, Thomas, you're such a kidder.
The old woman chuckled and turned back down the hall. The adults in the room went back to the conversations they were having when Harold came in. The children went back to playing their games. They each acknowledged Harold as he moved past them, but he was uncomfortable. He had never seen any of these people in his life. He was sure of it. Yet they all seemed to know him. At least they knew someone that must look an awful lot like him. Someone named Thomas. Even though he stood next to the fireplace, Harold felt an icy finger trickling down the back of his neck.
I'd really appreciate it if I could use your phone,
Harold said politely as he knew how. The last thing he needed was to get mobbed at the Walton family's Christmas special.
Oh, now you just sit right down here and let me get you a cup of coffee,
was the response that he received. The young woman that had spoken quickly made room for Harold on the sofa next to her. She had shoulder-length auburn hair and sparkling emerald eyes that hypnotized Harold immediately. She stood up gracefully and said,
"I'll be right back. There's no hurry, is there?"
She winked at him, and he saw something in those eyes. Hunger. That's what he saw. He had seen it in countless X-rated videos that he had watched back in his lonely apartment. She wanted him, just like the Platinum Princesses always wanted the man in those videos. Harold was no virgin, but it had been a long time since any woman wanted him at all. Never in his life had he dreamed that a woman that looked this good would want him with such animalistic intensity.
Sure, there's no hurry. I got no place I need to be right now anyway.
Harold's reply was almost drowned out by the loud groaning of the sofa as he sat down. She moved down the hallway, towards the homey sounds of dishes rattling, pots clanging, and women gossiping. When she returned, she carried a steaming cup of black coffee and a plate of fried chicken.
"I thought you might be hungry,"
she explained as she sat down.
"Big boy like you needs to eat to keep up his strength."
She giggled and placed a hand on his thigh, squeezing gently as she whispered tantalizingly into his ear.
"I bet you're big in all the right places, ain't ya?"
Harold almost choked on the coffee that he was swallowing. As he finished his coughing fit, one of the men that had been sitting across the room got up, stretched, and yawned loudly.
"Guess I'd better get out there and kill that turkey. That is, if we're planning on eating anything but Mama's cornbread for Christmas dinner,"
he commented as he strolled across the room.
"Can I help, Uncle Jake?"
asked one of the other children that had been playing on the floor.
"Nah, this is man's work. Your turn will come soon enough."
Jake sauntered down the hallway, and Harold heard the back door open and slam shut. A brief draft of cold air accompanied the man's exit. Some of the icy tendrils penetrated as far as the living room, sending a fresh batch of chills up Harold's spine. He took a large gulp of coffee and settled in next to the red-headed bombshell to his right. He tried to make polite conversation with the family members in the room. At one time, he even read a story to the little girls that had been scampering in and out of the room with reckless abandon. He began to feel quite good about himself. Maybe he had finally found a place to belong, if they would just stop calling him Thomas. As they talked, he gradually became acquainted with the family. No one actually introduced themselves. They acted as if he was already supposed to know them. Harold had to pick up their names as they addressed each other. Angelina was the name of the green-eyed beauty next to Harold. All through the conversation, she was constantly running her hand up and down his thigh. It was driving him crazy. He could smell her scent, clean and fresh with just a hint of perfume. It overpowered him as she leaned close and whispered to him again.
"Come on, Thomas. I've got something to show you."
She grabbed his hand, stood up, and pulled him towards the living room door. He had just enough time to snag a chicken leg from the untouched plate before letting himself be dragged down the hallway, out into the kitchen. There they had met Grandma, the old woman that had greeted him at the door.
"I'm taking Thomas out back, Grandma,"
Angelina reported with only a hint of mischief in her voice. Harold supposed that he was the only one who noticed, because Grandma began shooing them towards the back door.
You two have fun now.
She called out the door behind them, much too loud to compensate for their close proximity. Harold figured that the old bat must be going deaf in her old age. As soon as the door closed, Angelina sprinted across the yard to a little wooden shed out back. Harold was just biting into the chicken when she reached the door and turned to face him. There was something strange about this piece of chicken, but before he could decide what it was, Angelina suddenly pulled open her blouse, revealing the milky white breast it had covered. Her nipples stood out profoundly in the frigid December air. She pursed her lips and made a kissing sound, then giggled and disappeared into the shed. Harold stood for a moment, not believing what he had just seen. His heart hammered inside his chest as he tossed the chicken aside and bounded across the frozen ground towards the shed. This was truly the best day of his entire life. When Harold burst through the door of the shed, he was greeted with a sight that wouldn't quite register in his mind. Directly across the doorway was an open window. Standing on the other side of the window was Uncle Jake, and Uncle Jake was holding an incredibly large handgun leveled right at Harold's head. To Harold, it seemed that he had just stuck his head into the cannon.
Howdy, Tom. Glad you could come. Hope you don't mind staying for Christmas dinner. The family would just love to have you.
3 things flashed through Harold's mind as he heard the gun go off. The first thing was the recollection of his own grandfather calling a male turkey a Tom. The second thing was Harold realizing that that chicken leg he had been eating had joints.
Chicken legs don't have knuckles, you moron. That was a finger. A human finger.
The third and final thought was he was allowed a message from his survival instinct. Its 3-letter imperative was simple and to the point.
Run!
Unfortunately, Harold's legs never got the message. The bullet struck his forehead dead center, and his body was flung back out the shed to land on the frost-covered grass. It was 11:45 on Christmas morning when Sheriff Buddy Shears pulled up in front of Grandma Barlow's house. He was glad he had convinced the town council to purchase the Jeep last summer. Without its 4-wheel drive, he would have never made it up into the driveway. A winter storm had moved in the previous afternoon, dumping over a foot of snow on the county. Big, heavy flakes still spattered the windshield, threatening to cover it completely, despite the constant slapping of the wipers. Buddy hated to bother old Miss Barlow, especially on Christmas Day. She was such a nice old lady, seemed like she'd been living up here forever. From the look of the cars parked out front, he'd probably be interrupting the family's traditional Christmas dinner. His stomach growled angrily. He hadn't had time to eat any breakfast this morning. Buddy knocked 3 times on the door and was soon welcomed by Grandma Barlow.
Well, Walter Shears, what in the world brings you out in weather like this? Come on in the house and get out of this mess. You'll catch your death.
Buddy cringed at the mention of his given name, but stepped inside quickly.
I'm sorry to bother you, Mrs. Marlowe. It being Christmas and all, but we've had a little trouble up the road. Thought you might be able to help us out.
Well, I'll sure try. Come on in the dining room and have a seat. We were just getting ready to have Christmas dinner. I'll be glad to fix you a plate. There's more than plenty to go around.
Thank you, but no, I really can't stay.
His stomach rumbled in protest at these words. The aroma of the down-home cooking permeated the home, covering its normally musty odor like a warm blanket.
I just need to ask you if you've seen a big fella come through here since yesterday afternoon. Name's Harold Martin. We found his truck up the road, but we couldn't find him.
No, can't say I have, but then I was in the kitchen most of the day. Jake, have you seen any strangers around since yesterday?
She hollered back over her shoulder.
No, ma'am.
Came a muffled reply from the dining room. But he could hear the clatter of silverware. He caught a whiff of country ham, or was it baked chicken? More than likely it was both. Grandma Barlow was famous for putting out a good spread at mealtime, and Christmas was a special occasion. His stomach growled once again.
Well, I'm sorry to bother you all then. Damn fool probably broke down the storm and wandered off into Bailey's swamp. It won't be the first time some city boy went in there and never came out.
Probably won't be the last.
The old woman sighed.
Now, you just wait right there. I've got something to give you before you go.
Miss Barlow disappeared down the hallway before he could object. He was tired and impatient to get home. He had been up since 4 a.m. looking for Martin, and he wanted to get back to his wife and kids. The deputies could handle the search without him. He hated this Martin character for making him miss Christmas morning with his family. Just as Buddy was ready to slip out the door, making a quick getaway, Grandma Barlow came waddling back up the hall. She carried 2 large paper sacks. Holding up the one in her right hand, she said,
This one's for Marcy and the kids. I know how much they like my peanut butter cookies. And this one's for you. You look like you can use it.
Buddy took the bags and thanked the old woman. They exchanged goodbyes and Merry Christmases. Then he headed back out the door. Once in the Jeep, he opened the second bag and smiled. Maybe the morning was looking up after all. Inside the bag was a bottle of Coke and 4 chicken salad sandwiches. Grandma Barlow had always made the best chicken salad sandwiches that Buddy Shears had ever tasted. I was never so naive to think that our hobby wasn't extremely dangerous. In fact, deep down, I had settled on the prospect of it killing me one day, but I would never have guessed that it would be like this. After being nearly irretrievably lost on the dusty, untraveled roads of Death Valley for hours, we finally come across signs of civilization. Some little unincorporated town. Not our destination, but it's a place with a name, somewhere we can point at the atlas to get our bearings. It was my fault for making Jim the navigator anyway. It's not that he's bad with directions, it's that he's bad with relaying the information to me, the driver. He'll read ahead on the atlas to himself and then just watch out the window as you pass turnoff after turnoff. Short attention. No, doing what we do, you need to have a good sense of direction. When you found yourself in a spaghetti bowl of tunnels 900 feet beneath the Earth's crust, you can't afford not to. We first started exploring abandoned mines when we were kids. Jim's folks owned property that had one on it. It wasn't a big one. It only went in about 40 feet and collapsed beyond that. Nonetheless, we'd spend all day in that hole. Since then, we've explored about 17 other mines for nothing other than the thrill and the history. I'm going to stop at this gas station and get something to drink. Stretch my legs a bit before we head into the mine, I said. As soon as we got out, Jim was already snapping pictures of his brand new 1996 Ford Bronco against the desert backdrop. He always had that Polaroid camera around his neck to document our travels. A bell on a chain jingled as I pushed the door to the nameless gas station open. They didn't have many options as far as drinks went. I figured they probably only stocked what the few people that inhabited this place drink, since there's no way anyone from out of town was going to find this place, except us. I got a bottle of water. When I got back outside, Jim was staring at the window of the store with a stern but concerned look on his face, like he was trying to solve a riddle. "What's up?" I asked, turning to see what he was staring at. Missing posters. Most of them kids, but some adults. 12 of them.
How the hell do you have this many missing people in a town of, 800 people?
Jim said. I don't know. And why do you think they need these posters? You'd think that everyone in this town would know about this. I stepped closer to the posters to read the details. Missing from Mahogany Flat Campground. Last seen at Wild Rose Campground. Abandoned RV found on Nevada State Road 160. They're from all over the area, not just this town. Mostly campers.
That's crazy. There's so many. Serial killer, maybe?
Maybe. I don't know. Campers get lost all the time. I shrugged. Let's get going. We need to find the mine while it's still light. I started walking back to the Bronco as Jim lifted his Polaroid and snapped a picture of the window. Entranced, he looked up and down from the photo to the window for a few seconds more before pulling himself away from it. Pulling off one of the unpaved roads onto another more primitive one, we figured we were nearly there. Of course, we didn't get the property owner's permission to come poke around out here. People are too afraid of liability these days. It did pose a risk of wasting time, however. We wouldn't know until we arrived if the mine had been sealed off, collapsed, or if it even existed in the first place. We only learned about these things from rumors, researching old mining businesses, etc. This one was a silver mine that we had found pictures of in a friend's great-great-grandfather's personal effects. The guy's living relative told us where we might be able to find it, within miles of desert, that is. It wasn't long before we saw the headframe standing like a skeleton on the hill. Headframes are used on a specific type of mine, a vertical shaft. That means it drops straight down, sometimes 100 feet, sometimes 500 feet. This one is 900 feet, according to the old man's journal. We had discussed the possibility of there being a back at it, another entrance, at the bottom, on the side of the mountain, but they were always a pain in the ass to find, and usually collapsed when you found them. Here, we had a beacon showing us right where to go. We parked the Bronco behind the barely standing hoist building so it wouldn't be seen from the road at the base of the mountain, and began unloading our gear. Quite the amateur loadout, really. Some climbing rope, flashlights, headlamps, and helmets. The Polaroid.
Haha, check it out. It's a Sliver mine.
Jim said as he pointed to the hoist building door. The word Sliver was scratched into it.
Too bad they weren't mining Glod, or else they may have been able to afford an education.
We wasted almost no time. We were geared up and heading down the cramped manway, a series of ladders and narrow platforms that followed the shaft all the way to the bottom. We climbed for what seemed like an eternity, passing all kinds of dead animals that had fallen into the shaft. Stepping off into the first level, we figured we were probably 500 feet deep. Jim looked over the edge of the cage shaft to see how much further. He couldn't see the bottom. I hated when he leaned over shit like that. We weren't even on solid ground yet. We were still on the 100-plus-year-old wood platform. We looked around for a bit on the first level. Sedimentary lines streaked across the walls, pockmarked with pickaxe strikes. The ceiling is just high enough that you don't hit your head on the visibly strained supporting beams. It's easy to forget that there's hundreds of thousands of tons of rock and earth bearing down on these old beams at all times. A bent or broken beam is always a chilling reminder. Old crates that probably contained dynamite at one time, an old bottle, and a pack of cigarettes that haven't been sold in 30 years. Some spray paint on the wall said Nick, 78. "Let's keep going down," I said. Further and further down we went. The wood that made up the manway was more sturdy the further down, due to the elements not being able to reach it, but that's not to say it was safe. The whole thing could come down at any second for no other reason than we spoke too loud, or one of us sneezed, or something. Damn near anything could cause a collapse. We passed another level, but we decided to just press on. Down, 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 another level. We found a newspaper sitting on a crate. Date said 1934. The mine could have still been active then, but it was a good sign to find things less disturbed the further down we went. Another level, and the ladder is gone.
Fuck, there's still more down there,
Jim said in a harsh whisper.
Way more than 900 feet.
Maybe we can find a chute and squeeze through it, I suggested. This was not only risky, but also terrifying. Chutes were often barely just big enough for a single person, and there isn't always a way to tell if the bottom of the chute is clear, or if the miners just left a bunch of shit in it. Plus, we didn't even know if we'd find a chute. There would only be one if there was a back at it to this place. We got off that level and looked around. Mine carts, pickaxes, crates that still had dynamite. This place looks like it hadn't been touched since they closed it down. It didn't take long before we found the chute that led into the darkness below. "I'll go grab a crate to give us a leg up," I said.
Stay away from the one that still has dynamite. You know that old shit'll go up if you just look at it wrong.
"Bitch, I'm the one who told you that." Jim laughed as I went in search of a crate. When I got back, he was holding something. A necklace, like costume jewelry. "The fuck is that?" I asked.
I found it hung up in one of the chutes,
he said, holding it to his headlamp.
It looks like something a child would wear.
He looked closer at it, and then his eyes got wide. He took his backpack off and started rummaging around for something. He pulled out a Polaroid picture and studied it, then dropped his arms. "What?" I asked, growling impatient.
One of those kids from the missing poster,
he said as he held the photo up to my face.
That girl there, she's fucking wearing this necklace.
My throat squeezed, no doubt to keep my heart from jumping out of it. "You think she's down there?"
Maybe. I don't know.
Jim's voice becoming panicked. "There's no way she made it down here all by herself. Some fucking psychopath had to have drug her down here and tossed her down the chute. Fuck." It was becoming harder for us to keep our voices down.
Well, what do we do? Report it?
Jim said, his eyes darting wildly around the man-made cavern.
They'll know we were down here trespassing then. I mean, that necklace could have belonged to anyone. It's not like we found her body.
I just stood there eyeing the chute.
Oh, no,
he said, shaking his head.
I'm not going down there knowing there's a pretty good chance I'm going to find a little girl's body.
We could give her family closure. Jim shifted his weight to one foot and put his hand on his hip, still holding the necklace. He looked down at the photo in his other hand and let out a big sigh.
Fuck.
Stepping up onto the old crate, I peered into the chute. The darkness quickly consumed the light from both my handheld flashlight and the headlamp as if it were a black hole. The longer I looked, the more it felt like it was sucking me in. The darkness seemed to creep up the sides of the chute. It let me know that it wasn't going to let me escape if it got a hold of me. Shaken, I stepped back. "There's no air moving through here," I said, taking more than a few steps back from the chute. "That means there's probably not a way out down there."
What if we tied a rope around the mouth of the chute so we can climb back out?
I nodded. That was the only way I'd agreed to do this after staring down into its throat. After securing the rope, we looked at each other as if to say, "After you." But after seeing Jim's paling face, I decided that I would go first. I strapped myself in, took my backpack off for Jim to slide down after me, and raised my legs into the chute. They disappeared into the black.
"I'll be in right after you,"
Jim said. His face hadn't regained any color, and now started to look like he even aged in the short time that I took to strap myself in. I let my body slide down a few more feet as I felt the walls of the chute wrap around me. My shoulders barely made it inside, and there was no room to raise my head to look down where I was going. This is fucking insane, I thought. But I also asked myself what we were so afraid of. We had done this more than a few times. This wouldn't even be the first chute we had slid down. I suppose seeing a dead body wasn't exactly something that either of us were eager to do. But I just couldn't leave her down here with her parents left forever wondering what happened. Plus, with the body, they can do forensics and maybe even catch the guy that did this. Still though, my body was paralyzed with fear. If not for the slope of the chute, I would have been unable to move. It was irrational. There was no logic behind it. I've been in some sketchy mines. I've dropped my only flashlight hundreds of feet into pitch black, and I've narrowly avoided a cave-in, but nothing compares to what has a cold grip on the nape of my neck right at that moment. My breathing became shaky, and my heart pounded so hard that it thumped on the walls of the chute. I slid deeper and deeper. Although the temperature was a constant 54 degrees, I was sweating profusely. I may have even begun to cry a bit. I'd slid down for so long that I just wanted it to fucking end. Let me fall out onto a dead little girl. I don't care. Just make it fucking stop. And then, it did. Although it was the goal to reach the bottom and search for anything that may either confirm our suspicions or refute them as overactive imaginations, I found myself unwilling to examine my surroundings for fear of what the oppressive dark has been hiding down here, to finally be illuminated by a single, weak headlamp. I opened my eyes. There was nothing. There's no little body, no pile of corpses, no blood, bones, or gore. Well, that's it then, I thought. I'll just climb up so we can go home. But was it not our intention to come down here anyway? Wasn't it the plan to find a chute to continue our exploration into the very deepest parts of this mine? It wasn't until the necklace that the mine seemed to change, as if that necklace had awakened the mine, or, more accurately, awakened the darkness. All around me, the darkness seemed to be sentient, fingers of the black void reaching in from the edges of my headlamp beam, closing in, getting darker. My headlamp battery was running out. I turned back to the chute to yell for Jim to slide my backpack down. It had extra batteries and my handheld flashlight. I peered into the chute and yelled, but nothing. I waited to see if I could catch a glimpse of a tiny pinpoint light to indicate that Jim was looking down at me, but there was nothing, just black. I called out again and again, no response. At some point, I felt as though I weren't calling Jim anymore, but rather asking the dark, pleading with it, begging. Just when I thought the blood in my body would surely begin to dry up, I heard something coming down the chute. The sound of nylon rubbing against smooth wood increased in pitch as it gained speed through the long tunnel before flying into my open arms. I opened the backpack to find that it only contained a Polaroid camera and some extra climbing clips among a few other things. This was Jim's pack. Mine had extra batteries, and Jim's had the rope, which was being used as my safety line back. Another sliding noise. The rope began gathering at my feet. That was it. There was no way up the chute. It was far too narrow and steep to climb. It was going to be difficult even with the rope, but now, using the chute was impossible. I yelled again for Jim, screamed. I screamed for Jim. Nothing. What was happening? Had Jim planned this all along? Had he planned on getting me somewhere I couldn't escape and leave me to die? All that bullshit about the necklace. I ate it up, and then all too willingly allowed myself to go first. What was his motivation? Why would he do this? If I ever make it out of this place, I'm going to fucking strangle him. Strangle him and toss him down the chute. See how he likes it, the fucking asshole. No, I had lost myself in that moment. For that moment, I had forgotten who Jim even was other than the target for my anger. Anger being a byproduct of the immense fear that I find creeping in on me in all directions. Something must have happened to Jim. Never in a million years would he purposely do something like this to me. Would he? I turned off my headlamp to conserve what little battery it had left. The darkness slammed shut on me. At that moment, I was ensnared by it, as if the darkness was so powerful that I could actually feel it on my skin, all around me. I sat there in absolute black to gather my thoughts. I was at a complete loss of what to do. There was no ladder that connected this level to the manway on the upper levels, and there was no way up the chute. I had about 3 days left, I figured. In 3 days, I would die of dehydration. I stood up and began walking, slowly, hands feeling along the cold stone wall, easing my foot out step by agonizing step. The absolute darkness made the space seem both smaller, more enclosed, but also more vast. I felt as if I reached my hand out, I would not be able to feel the other side of the tunnel. Sometimes I couldn't, but other times, it was just cold and empty darkness. It was no use. The tunnels and walls just seemed to go on forever, and my heart raced with every unsure step that I took. The ground was becoming less even, and debris seemed to have become more prevalent. Easing my foot more carefully, I traced out a ledge in front of me. I kicked some rocks in. It seemed to only be a few feet deep, and then the smell hit me. It was a familiar smell, but one that I had never come across this deep in a mine, like old death. Stale, mummified corpses long dead and dried up, isolated from any natural means of returning its flesh to the earth, and it was coming from beyond the ledge before me. My knees began to give, as if my body was physically trying to keep me from going forward. I felt dizzy, intoxicated by the disorienting darkness, exacerbated by the fetid stench. I had to turn my headlamp on, if only for a few seconds. I had to see what that smell was. The dying light was so dim, it seemed as though I were looking through smoke, but I could still see them. Bodies, human bodies, dismembered in various ways and strewn across the pit. Skull fragments littered the tunnel from where I came, like dead leaves on a forest floor. Dried, gray skin stretched across silently shrieking skulls, each having an expression of absolute terror, peeking out from legs, arms, and torsos. I tried to back away, but my mind was breaking. Messages were getting mixed up. My body didn't know whether to run or stay put, because I knew there was nowhere to go. I fell on my ass and continued to scoot away from the pit, sliding on broken skeletons as I did. I backed myself up against a wall and put my face in my hands. My sobs turned into screams, then into wretched groans echoing off the walls of this hell. I pulled myself to my feet and turned away from the pit to find a different route. I kept my headlamp on. I couldn't chance not being able to see, and I'd be able to move faster, but it did little to help my disorientation. Nothing seemed the same upon a second glance. Parts of the stone wall seemed to move in the beam of my dim light. There were also artifacts here that I would have been thrilled about had the circumstances been different. Tools, tables, carts. Carts. If there are carts, there must have been rails leading back to the main shaft. The rails seem to be gone now, probably pulled up when they closed the mine. But if I look closely at the ground, I can see the grooves where they once were. I began to follow. My headlamp seemed to dim with every step I took as I traced along the grooves. Eventually, I had to feel the grooves with my foot. I had silently agreed with myself that if I couldn't make it up or down the main shaft, I'd just jump. I continued to slide one foot along and step with the other until I noticed that my step had become louder. I stopped, and there was another step behind me. I slid and stepped, then stopped. Another step fell behind me after I had stopped. Someone is here, with me, and they're following me. I froze in my tracks, no pun intended. The once dead silence of the mine was now filled with the whooshing and thumping of blood and heartbeats. Every creak of my joints echoed off the walls now that my safety depended on my hearing rather than my sight. Try as I might to steady my shuddering breathing, there was nothing I could do to dampen the sound of my merely being alive. My headlamp had dimmed to the brightness of a lit cigarette, but instinct overrode logic and turned to face the direction that the sound of a footfall had come from. As you would expect, I saw nothing but black behind me, at first. After several minutes, I was tentatively convinced that I was experiencing some sort of madness from my short isolation and visual deprivation. I took one more step, and then there was no doubt. Someone, or something, had stepped on a skull fragment several feet behind me, causing a snap to ring out. It might as well have been a gunshot. It seemed just as loud and caused an interruption of certain circulatory and nervous functions just the same. My head snapped again to look behind me, and that's when I saw two dim orange lights, reflections, like those of an alligator peering out from a black swamp, or a tiger's as it lay in ambush while the rest of the body remained invisible, perfectly camouflaged in the grasslands and darkness of a savanna night. Those two orange hints of lights were all I could see, only reflecting back the same magnitude of light that my dying headlamp could provide. They were still, motionless, soulless, and unblinking, surrounded in pitch black. The dark was alive, and it was watching me, following me. For a moment, my propensity for logic and reasoning offered an interpretation of the events transpiring. Perhaps Jim had found another way down, and he, just as panicked by seeing my own dim orange glow, was paralyzed by horror. I should call out to him, I thought.
"Jim,"
I whispered.
"is that you?"
Instantly shocked by my own words, their spontaneity frightened me in the absence of any other sound. How could I have just done that? I thought. Despite all the reasoning I had done prior, I felt that I had not thought the act through. Feeling my face grow increasingly cold from the lack of blood supplied to it, the darkness responded.
"Jim?"
A whisper, raspy and dry, as if from wind blowing through dead trees.
"Jim? Jim? Is that you? Jim? Is that you? Jim? Jim? Is that you? Is that you?"
The voice seemed to be wholly unnatural, uncanny, and immediately triggered some sort of bestial response in me. A response that made all of the events, details, and circumstances leading up to this point suddenly important to me. I was several hundred feet below the Earth's surface, in pitch blackness, surrounded by hundreds of dismembered bodies, in an enclosed space shared with some abominable diversion of what I understood of the natural world. And nobody even knew I was down there. I would die if I didn't act soon.
"Is that you? Jim? 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 Is that you? Jim?"
The whispers continued. I ran. No longer concerned with the direction of tracks, I resolved to running anywhere walls would allow me. Arms stretched out in front of me, I ran blind, with footsteps following behind me, now demonstrating the fall pattern of a four-legged creature, growing closer, closing in. This was it, I thought. Glancing back yielded nothing, not even the orange reflections. My headlamp had completely died, and I would be soon to follow suit. I succumbed to the hopelessness. There was nothing I could do. There was nowhere I could turn. Cut and bruised from running into walls, dazed from cranial impacts from overhead beams, sick from the smell and unable to see, I was only prolonging my own demise and torturing myself with a constant rise and fall of hope. I stopped running. And so did the other footsteps. Out of breath and dizzy, I struggled to comprehend what was happening. The termination of pursuit was completely unexpected. Completely surprised by my own resourcefulness, I remembered that I was in possession of Jim's Polaroid camera. The camera had a flash on it. I could see once and for all my surroundings, options for escape, and most importantly, the identity of my pursuer. Slowly, I pulled one arm through the strap of Jim's backpack and quietly swung it out in front of me. Following the length of the zipper, I found the tab and began to pull. There was a quick scatter of debris from Black, as if the darkness flinched at the sound of the zipper. I froze. But no sooner had the noise started, it had stopped. I continued to unzip. I reached my hand in and retrieved the camera, looped its strap around my neck, and returned the backpack. Hands shaking and a trembling finger on the button, I raised the camera to my chest and aimed it into the void, and flashed a blinding light throughout the tunnel. In an instant, everything was bright white, and as if a photograph developed by my own eyes, the image appeared. Sharp shadows cast from jagged protrusions in the walls, reaching toward the center of the tunnel for about 20 feet before it curved out of sight. It stood on all fours. Its body was human in appearance, but its limbs were anything but. Its hind legs stood on a tall heel, much like most four-legged, ground-dwelling mammals, and its arms were long like that of a bat wing, but without the membranous skin that enabled flight. Both feet and hands had long, bony toes and fingers, and its face, oh God, its face. A thin neck connected to an abnormally large chin. High cheekbones held its glowing eyes like pedestals. Its angular visage was a portrait of waning humanity that had been replaced by a manifestation of pain, horror, and torment. It shrieked in the preceding darkness of the flash, and I heard it retreat back down into the depths of the tunnel. During the flash, I could see, just to the right of where the creature had stood, there was a passage that led to a dark area with a narrow wooden platform. That must be the manway for the main shaft, I thought. I took advantage of the respite the creature had afforded me and booked it to the platform. I took the picture out of the camera's ejection slot and shoved it in my back pocket, then snapped another picture. It turned out it was the main shaft, but there were no ladders leading up. They seemed to all have been broken away, platforms too. I turned my attention downward and I could see, down about 25 feet, there was a tunnel that was glowing with the faint light of the setting sun, and at it, there was a back entrance after all. I took another picture. In the flash, I could see that there was nothing below the platform I was standing on. There was no way down but to jump, so I did. Landing on my sides, arms wrapped around my head, I immediately felt immense pain throughout my entire body. My ribs on the side that I had landed on felt like they were broken and shifted inward, making breathing difficult. My right leg was limp at the shin, and my right forearm had a jagged protrusion that I suspected to be bone. I pulled myself to stand on one foot and began to hop toward the illuminated tunnel, bracing myself on the wall as I went. As I entered the tunnel, the faint, evening light was almost blinding, but nonetheless, I could finally see outside. The desert air cradled my face like warm, welcoming hands, cooling the streaks of tears and sweat. I came up on a dead and withered mesquite tree and broke a branch off to use as a crutch. Walking still proved difficult from my inability to brace myself using my broken arm. The protrusion was indeed bone. I began walking, best that I could, up the hill. From this angle, it looked totally unrecognizable at the point that Jim and I began our journey. After about 2.5 hours of walking, night had fallen, and I could barely make out what appeared to be black scaffolding-like voids in the stars behind the top of the hill. It must be the head frame, I thought. Home stretch. I continued hopping, sliding, and tripping up the hill. Every once in a while, I would hear pebbles falling from the incline, or a scraping of dead mesquites. A rabbit would occasionally jump out from behind a creosote bush. Any other time, this environment, the plants, the animals, the gentle breeze, the beautiful opalescent sky, would give me a feeling of peace and tranquility. But I was quickly losing my nerve. I couldn't shake the sense that I was still being followed. Bright as the cosmic specks of light were, they did little to allow the ability to make out what might have been the creature's white body against the sand behind me. Things moved all around me, and noises never seemed to have a source. I caught glimpses of movement out of the margins of my vision, but when I look, Nothing there. Pareidolia plagued the horizon, as everything that sprouted from it seemed sinister. I made it up the last ledge of the hill that hid the mine in its belly. I made it. I was nearly crawling at that point. Jim's Bronco seemed to remain the same distance, no matter how much ground I covered. I was slowly passing the headframe when I was blinded by light and caught off guard by a loud crunch of gravel and the gentle rumble of a truck engine. I put my hands up to shield my eyes and then collapsed. I heard the truck door open. "Hey, are you all right?" A man's voice said as he approached me. He was silhouetted in front of his headlights. I couldn't answer. I was too weak and thirsty. "What the hell are you doing on my property?" the man asked before taking a closer look to see what I was wearing, a climbing harness and a headlamp. "You was in the mine, wasn't you?" I nodded. You must be crazy jumping off in there by yourself at night." Not alone. Jim." "There's somebody else in there?" he asked. I nodded. "But there's something else. There's something in there." I reached into my back pocket and pulled out the picture. The man reached down and took the picture and studied it for a moment. "Does anyone else know you're out here?" I looked up at him to see if I could make out any expression that would indicate what he intended by that question. I couldn't. He put the picture in his pocket and knelt down in front of me. "That thing's got a name." He paused to look and nod at the valley I had just trekked from. "It's Sliver." No sooner than he had said that, I felt my whole body being jerked away, as if being tied by the ankles to a bull running full brake. The beams of the truck's headlights got smaller, and the man stood up and watched as I was dragged away, kicking, flailing, and screaming. The metal bars of the headframe flew past my head, reaching for them to no avail, and then I was in the shaft, violently grasping the air and the earth, and desperately shrieking, watching as the window of the opalescent sky got further and further away, darker and darker, until it finally went black. The end. Bo, why am I always so tired? I don't remember being this tired, even before 3 years ago. Even when I worked full time, I was never this tired. Dude, you know what happened 3 years ago. I've told you the story 100 times. Fine, I'll tell you again. It all happened about 3 years ago. That strange mist that covered the entire world. It had been all over the news, all over social media. Everybody was simply calling it the mist. But they soon realized it wasn't just that. It wasn't just a mist. It brought this horrible, terrible death. It was bad. It was real bad, Bo. But the thing that made it worse was half the world didn't believe it was real. These a-holes that were sitting behind their keyboards, what did they call them? Keyboard warriors, declared that it was some sort of hoax. It was every government in the world was trying to, scare their citizens into believing. I don't know. People are stupid. These claims happened all the way up until the world fell into chaos, which was happening pretty damn quick. What these people who truly believed that this wasn't happening, man, I can only imagine what the naysayers had gone through when they watched their friends and family die. Or worse. That mist brought a disease that killed billions. Billions, Bo. And if the disease didn't kill you, it turned you into this violent, vicious, murderous creature. I didn't understand it. In fact, the only people that probably could understand died from the mist or being murdered by the creatures. But there was a small number that wasn't affected one way or the other, like myself. And like myself, for most of the others, life only got worse. As more people turned into these diseased, these infected, they started killing off anyone that was still alive. It was so brutal that it would make most zombie movies look silly. Those that remained either died or they had to defend themselves aggressively. And by that, I mean they had to kill these things with an absolute resolve by whatever means necessary. Gun, axe, baseball bat, hell, even a vinyl record if you had it. But no matter what your weapon, you didn't stop until they stopped moving. And then you went a little more. Before that day, I'd never killed so much as a rat. And then I killed 2 of them. They were my friends, Bo. You know, I can still hear that weird breathing thing that they do when they're wanting or ready to attack. But those early days were dark. They were real dark. I had very little reason to live. I was alone, no one around. But some small, almost quiet voice in my head told me to hold on just a little bit longer. But then one day, a small ray of light. I was starving. I hadn't eaten in days, it felt like. I just drank the last bit of my water. So I'd gone out hunting something. I guess from the hunger, the thirst, I passed out. When I woke up, I was surrounded by people. At first I thought I was dead or dreaming or I don't know what I was. I don't know.
Oh, look, food and water. Hurry up and eat and let's get moving. You know, before you get us killed.
Rachel, please. Sorry for her, but she's not wrong. There's food and water. We have a place that is safe-ish. You're welcome to come with us, but we need to go soon.
Yeah, come along if you want. I still have trees to cut down.
They told me that this community was, you know, safe-ish. People helped, protected, cared for each other. I was on board for that. I was tired of being alone. And being in this place, among these people, made the burden of life a little bit less. It was going great until about 6 months ago. A small group of ours that had gone into town to try and find some supplies, whatever they could find, ran into another group of human survivors. I say human lightly. They weren't. I mean, they were, but they weren't.
Move it, asshole. I said move.
Oh, this is not good.
We'll take what we need. I'll take what I want.
Yeah, we'll take what we want, that's for sure.
Kate and Rachel were there, and I know they weren't about to let that shit happen.
I'll die before he touches us.
I got your back, Katie. We'll cut him down like trees.
And what seemed like a miracle in disguise happened.
Hey, the mist is coming, we gotta go!
As you know, the mist, that's become a completely different story now. You either died, or you turned into one of these beasts. And these beasts roam during the mist, and during the night.
Come on, the truck is a half mile! Yeah, we'll catch those hoes later.
From this point though, the run-ins with these strangers, this other group of survivors, became more and more frequent. They become more and more violent, more and more bloody. They always turned into a gunfight. And more often than not, either one of them died, or one of us died. Either way, it was terrible loss of life. And then one day, 3 months ago, as you know, I went out hunting. Had a great day. I bagged 3 or 4 chickens, I think. Killed this 39-point buck. I mean, it's probably more like 6, but, you know, nobody's gonna tell me different. As I was heading back to camp, I smelled it. That smell of gunpowder and death. It filled my nostrils. It was sickening. As I got to the camp, I immediately noticed it was completely void of life. It was terrible. The smell was disgusting. And then I spotted the one man that was still alive. He'd been left in pain. His wounds were going to kill him. But these bandits couldn't even... Sick mother... Anyway, Bo, I talked to him.
We didn't even hear him.
Talk to me, old man. This doesn't look like infected. Was this the bandits?
Yes, it was those bandits. They killed everyone except Kate, Rachel, and Scott. They're out there somewhere. They took them. I heard them talking about making them see the light.
What the hell does that mean, see the light?
I'm done for. You have to find them. You have to save them.
Sadly, there was nothing I could do for him. Except provide him a mercy. And that's the day that you were born, Bo. You weren't just a tool for survival anymore. But you become my instrument of death. My revenge. My twisted justice. And as the old man requested, we will find and save our friends. And I promise you this, Bo. No matter where we have to go. No matter who we have to kill. No matter what we have to kill. Not even the sick gods of hell is gonna save the scum that murdered our people. Yeah, I know. Of course it would be better if Scott had built it. Ugh. But it was either here or in the hotel with our infected friends. Would you like me to take you back, you ass? Anyway, we leave today, Bo. After 3 months. 3 months of searching, tracking, looking under every rock. We finally have some clues. Today, we start finding out what happened to our friends. Yeah, I know it's going to be dangerous. You know what else is dangerous? Do ya? Huh? Yeah, that's right, me. I'm dangerous. I've always wanted to say that, but I guess I'm about as dangerous as any other human with a weapon. Oh, Bo, I could stay here forever, but our friends... It really is beautiful, Bo. What a view. Okay. Alright, gonna get our stuff packed. Be ready to go in 10. I lied. We're leaving now. Bo, I know we're near a lake, but does that look like a mist for me? We can't afford that right now. Let's keep going. Damn it, I hate not knowing if this is the mist or fog. I don't see anything at the moment. I think we're safe. But yeah, let's get a move on. Bo, that's a bear, and that's where we need to go. Oh, buddy, this freaking grizzly bear in our way. Run, Bo. He's catching. Oh my god, he just won't give up. Alright, I think we're okay. Oh, Bo, I am exhausted. That bear, oh my god. Dude, we barely escaped that. I really want to take a minute to rest, but we gotta keep moving, I guess. Our friends are waiting. Bo? How have we not seen this place before? Yeah, I know it could be nice, but it's also nice not to have bandits around. Yeah, it really is a nice place, Bo, but it's just too out in the open. I mean, there's a road there. Could mean that the bandits could get here easily. No. Anyway, we need to go in and check it out, make sure no one's here. Dude, quiet. If there's anyone in here, I don't want them to know we're here first. Bo, keep it down. Looks pretty deserted. No one's here. This is good. That's fine. Alright, let's check upstairs. Closed door, I don't like that. Alright, buddy, on the count of 3. 1, 2. Guess nobody's here. Yeah, this would be a great place, but again, I don't like where we're at. Alright, that's enough. Let's get back to work. We have a long way to go before sunup. Dude, whose idea was it to do this at night? Alright, we lost those few. I can still hear them. Keep your eyes open. Oh, shit. Dude, gotta go. Dude, this could end badly. Gotta keep moving. It sounds like a whole herd back there. Alright, Bo. Way too many. We just gotta run. Go. I think we finally lost them, Bo. Oh my god. Got him. Let's go. Alright, we haven't seen any for a while. I think we're okay now. Buddy, what possessed us to try to do this at night? Dude, what the hell was that? Did that sound like a gun? Did you see it? I didn't. Alright, good news is, Bo, we are almost there. Almost. Alright, Bo. This is where it starts. We kill everyone but one. We need information. Damn it, Bo. I really don't care about losing my humanity. That shit was taken when they killed our friends. Bo, make me miss again, I'll throw your ass in a fire. Now shut up and let's get this done. You have one chance to continue living. Where are my friends?
They'll come for you.
He was already dead, Bo. He forfeited his life the minute he joined them. I'd already decided to kill him, information or not.
Hello?
Wait, is that
Is someone there?
Rachel?
Yowtsin?
Yeah, it's me. Holy hell, Bo, one of them is alive.
How are you here?
An explanation is gonna have to wait, Rachel. We've got a long way to go to get to safety. Let's get you out of here. Rachel, keep running. We're almost there. A little further, and we can lose them.
Wow. So all this time, all along, you've been out there trying to find us?
No. Not alone.
Oh. Okay?
Anyway, you know how to get to the cabin? I gave you that rough map. There's definitely plenty of food and water there. Make sure to help yourself. I think the place is mostly safe, although you're still gonna probably have to deal with the infected, so be careful.
Yao,
Yeah, Rach?
I heard them talking about taking someone to the city.
Well, thanks for the info. I'll see you soon. Damn it. Yeah, dude, we're going to the city like Rachel said. I mean, if there's the slightest chance that one of them is there, we can't not go, dude. Yeah, Bo, we'll be careful, of course. I'm Mr. Careful. You think at some point we will have killed enough infected that the mist or night will no longer be dangerous? I mean, think about it. The mist or the night doesn't spawn these creatures in from some other dimension. They were human. And I know that there were billions of humans on the planet. But I also know that there are other survivors out there like us, and like the bandits, who are killing these guys every day, every night. And speaking of bandits, where the hell are they getting all of these recruits? Some catalog? Anyway, I was just thinking maybe someday we can just enjoy being alive. No more of this fight for our survival every moment we're awake. Dude, I hate being out in the mist so bad. Shit. Oof. Oh man. Shit. Got his shoulder. Whew. Dude, these are getting to be way too close. Oh. Dude. Oh, God. Man. That still hurts, buddy. You gotta rest. Dude, there's just too many. Dude, I don't want to spend another night out traveling. We're on the outskirts of a town. We need to find someplace to stay. Yeah, this looks promising. Let's get up there and take a look. Yeah, dude, this is awesome. Got plenty of cover from the trees, the mountains. Nothing's gonna be coming from that direction. Yeah, let's get some rest. Oh, dude, I can't believe we got a full night's sleep. Man, why am I still so tired? Anyway, let's get a move on, man. Holy shit. Dude, would you look at this place? This is beautiful. You think... Oh, wow. Maybe after all this is said and done, Kate, Rachel, Scott, and I can just settle down here. You know, shack up and start our operation. Yeah, come on, dude. You know the operation I'm talking about. Repopulate the world? Yeah, I know I'm terrible. Someone's got to do it, right? I mean, at some point, why not us? Got to think about the future, baby. Anyway, Bo, enough of your nonsense. Alright, buddy, we're coming up to the city. Have to keep an eye out to see if there's any patrols around. Certainly they have some. Yeah, I see one way up there. Is that a second one? A third. Dude, there's a ton of them. This doesn't look like a patrol. Looks more like a hunting party. There's no way they could have known we were coming. It's just you, me, and Rachel. Well, no matter, they're all going to die. Nice work, buddy. Nice shot. Oh, shit! Boy, that hurt. It's a good thing. The trees took most of that blast. Need to find a place to rest. Wake me after a little bit, dude. I just need a little time. Buddy, how long was I out? Doesn't look like very long. Man, I am hurting. Let's head back in. Dude, there's more. How many are there? Shit, missed. Oh, you're gonna have to do this, buddy. Nice shooting. Keep it up. Nice. He's too far. He's too far, buddy. Oh my god. Jeez, they just keep coming. Why are there so many? Easy, buddy. Don't get too far. Shit. Oh, nice work. All right, let's head over to the front. Nice. Buddy, that's a mist coming in. We need to clear this up fast. This is not going to go well. Maybe we finally cleared all the bandits. I don't know. I really didn't want to do this during a mist, but doesn't seem we have much of a choice. It's either now or never. There, bud. Steady. Nice shot. God, they keep coming out of the woodwork, dude. How many have we killed? We really need to start checking these buildings. Kate? Scott? Shit. Oh my god, dude. This is not good, buddy. Oh my god. This is bad, dude. Come on. Oof. Dude. Come on. Nice shot, buddy. They just don't stop coming. Oh. This was never a good idea. Oh my god. Dude. Kate? Scott? Damn it. Where are these guys? Kate? Scott? I hear them. Dude, we have looked all over this place. Kate? Scott? Talk to me. Man, they're just... Alright, buddy, I think we need to wait out the storm here. That mist needs to go. Dude, didn't we kill one right there? What? I don't get it. See, he's over there. We didn't kill him. Do you think this is a trap? I don't know. He's alive. We need to talk to him. Careful, buddy. Careful. I think we're okay, but... Hey, what's up, asshole? Please tell me where my friends are. I have murdered everyone in the entire city. Yeah, I've also searched it. They aren't here. If you refuse to tell me, things might get ugly. Now, I do want you to understand that you may make it out of this alive, but you just need to tell me what I want to know. Do you think your friends are going to come look for you? No, you're right. I don't think they will. Because they're dead. You know, in fact, I doubt if anyone is alive, they even care. So tell me, are you really willing to risk your life for a group of people that doesn't even give a rat's ass about you?
I don't know, okay? I know who you're talking about, but I don't know where they are. I just know what I've heard.
Huh. You know, I actually think you're telling me the truth.
Why?
Come on, dude. You've given me nothing. You want to save your life? Give me something.
I will. I heard they took him up to the cave. That's all I know.
The cave. Do you care to elaborate?
Yes. Yes, the cave. Past the water plant. That's all I know. Are you leaving me now?
Sure. I'm gonna leave you now. Bo, I don't give a damn what you think. I'm doing what I must to save our friends. So shut up and let's go. But it's been a while since we've been through here. That was before the bandits though, right? Yeah, I feel like this is a place that they would probably try to claim. So let's just take it slow. Make sure we're not going to be jumped by anything or anyone. Alright, here we go. Oh shit, there's two. Alright, let's do this. Nice. Shit. Damn, there's two more over there. Let's get this one. Okay, let's go. Come on. Careful. I mean, they obviously know we're here now. Steady. Come on. There we go. Nice work. Alright, Bo. That's a pretty big patrol. Is this because of us? Yeah, I remember that gas station. Actually got some snacks there one time. Alright, I think that might have been it, buddy. Might be in the clear. Yeah, we're looking pretty good. Alright. One more quick look. Let's get a move on. Go. I had to go off and leave Bo behind. Son of a bitch, I'm having chicken for breakfast. Come back here, you little bastard. Gotcha! Guess who's having drumsticks for breakfast? Oh, we've been traveling this road for some time. We haven't seen anything. Haven't heard anything. Whoa, what's that? Dude, we were here just a few weeks ago. There was nothing here. Don't tell me those bastard bandits have moved over here. Whoa. Damn it. come on. There we go. I don't know how he missed that with that shot. It's like a tower. Like a watchtower, right? Son of a bitch, they do have someone up there. Careful, Bo. Don't know what their plans are up there. Alright. Breathe. Oh shit. Bo, I can't believe we made that, buddy. You're the best friend ever. Alright. I guess we gotta clear this place. We can't leave any of them alive. Alright, we're looking pretty good. Yeah, let's get inside. Come on, Bo. Come on, dude. Quiet. Shh, shh. Careful. Back. I'm certain I saw someone. I know they're coming. There he is. Oh. Nice. Alright, buddy, we got this. Stay on your toes. Looks empty now. Oh. There we go. I really want to check out this tower, but we need to clear. Alright. I think we're good, buddy. Kinda want to check out. Yeah, actually, let's check out front first. There's only 4 here, huh? Alright, just check out this little shed, and let's get up to that tower. Slow. Quietly. Oh, man, that was a great shot. I do not like to close doors. Here we go. 1, 2.
Yowtsin?
Holy hell, Katie? God, am I happy to see you. Ah, so surprising.
How did you find me?
By chance, actually.
How so?
I've been looking for you all over the place. I just happened to come across this place and decided to clear it out. But I definitely didn't expect you here.
What do you mean clear it out?
Don't ask if you don't want to know.
You mean...
Let's get you out of those ropes.
What about Rachel and Scott?
Rachel was alive when I left her. I haven't found Scott yet.
Left her?
Yeah, I sent her to a cabin in the woods.
Oh.
It's the same place you'll need to go for now.
Can't I go with you?
Not this time, Katie. You know Rachel's gonna need you sooner rather than later.
Alright, Yao. I'll head out first thing in the morning.
Wandering into the void, I, traveler, find a blackened skull, enchanted with darkened runestones that hummed with sacred child soul, screaming for his father's name. Me, father, swiftly distorting time and space, only to feel fear, yet knowing only pain and torment, and that she will get no release. Eternal suffering, courage to go on is determination to never love tomatoes. Love that took strength to overcome filthy heart, failing forever, stealing his resolve to end the monster within the well that his daughter drowned, sadness overtaking, all encompassing. The table of death's feast sat motionless as remains of humans are served atop blood and served with bone wine. Then the fallacy of the twisted towel wraps. Damned be the man of towels who lay waste at banana hammocks, so moist and supple with tiger stripe sequins. Lost in the swamp, I fell afar from my home, to travesty, unseen, and oh how the travels left me away. Clad in the death of nightmares, he fought through grief, and pillows stuffed with regret, desire, and a deep conversation. Ashes to ashes. Fulfill the striped banana hammock with tiger pajamas, that none shall ever forget the hardships of that night. Exhausted, strapped, handcuffed, from the playthings of demons and angels. Majestic werewolves with flowing gray ear hair braided with elven strands of pube, adorned gracefully, topped with magenta, honey, and blueberry whipped cream. Oddly, the way it smelled while I was burning milkweed caused me to convulse with passion and desire, and pancakes. Penis-shaped cookies dipped in ass-flavored chocolate with beakers topped with V-joined and creamed strawberries. And pepper. CC mint V juices, not joined. Reality shifting into opening mall of never-ending tanks and girls. Girls! This isn't where I parked my car. Is humanity dying? Shenanigans and shit. Avenge rectum aches with furious fiery friction. Anger leads me to scratch his face, causing infectious scabs. His ass bugle theory of infinite propulsion dictates that feelings are stupid. Noble nuts and Ritz crackers served naked, whilst on a plate of pubes. Would you like that with red sauce or white sauce? Waiter, 1 noble nuts and white sauce, and don't forget the V-juice. Waking suddenly, I realize my boner cat purrs out its lady song me. Horny, love you long time, in the basement. Are you really that big? Uncle Larry in the library with the candlestick. Fantasies of moist apple juice, lace cyanide sprinkles on toast. That's kids. This is tied to handrails. Uncle Larry ponders the existence of Bigfoot while gingerly pooping. Stroking his Bigfoot. Get hard on. Lost when looking under a woman's dress. Make like a bathtub. Crawl inside and I'll get you wet. Get hookers and blackjack. A human head weighs 9 pounds. Jerry sighs in frustration, knowing he'll regain his enormous, bulging, fur-berry broomstick, the girth exceeding the horror wrought by years of labored noodling. Shoring. Hey, did anyone see which way that freaking garden gnome went? Little bastard took my underwear. Yes, it was an anal-dwelling gnome. He went. Damn those butt gnomes, dwelling in canals. Show me your potatoes, but wave, spare me the asparagus. I'm allergic. 2 eyes popped open, 'cause Popeye the Sailor Man, I eats me spinach. Ass. Outhouses blow sweet aromas, wafting filthily dampness wafts damply, and soggy bottom boys. Puckering buttholes of doom, send fart clouds and stuff. From scratches, I watch. Yes, my son, come with me to the little room in the back. We have candy and coke. Sometimes. And puppets with melted vocal monkeys. Watch out, and listen to the screams of the outhouses wafting damply. Praise be to the outhouse gods, the holy mother of toilet. Leprechauns chasing your mama, and your butt, and for her lucky charms. Be gone, foul fart demon, O mother of TP, please be soft as I wipe my ass. And Pegasus. Challenge eulogies, rectify the holy rectum, hallowed be thy name. Who you gonna call? Rectum ghost. The taste of rainbow, colonoscopy kiss. Stiffly, time to get swifty. Dumpsters with fish sticks. Multiple catheters protruding from my orifices, my ass. Bugs and mold in my ass? Rigor mortis love puppet slides down and own liquid filth. I bathe the leprechaun in hatred juice without sanity. I scrub voices echoing through mirrors, shattering my psyche and filled my heart. And pestilence crept out, chittering depression into my soul. Throwing vomit into the void, caution aneurysm awaits the shallow. Quantum swabs remind me of having sex with leprosy. I lose a piece of my soul each time I enter. Dwindling oxygen threatened my rabbits. Their eyes simply could not tolerate the atmosphere and exploded. Their fur becoming impossibly floofy as the electricity sparked. Igniting liquid nitrogen, mixed organs rolled out. Slabs of flesh littered the sidewalk of crematoriums as the bodies danced, switching parts with each other. As Gargoyle's penis envy is legendary, ballads often sing of the misfortunes this envy. Pornographic paradise, if you will listen. And open, puta, they whisper. SpaghettiOs remind me of despair. The sauce and depression took my sanity long ago and left me a hollow feeling like SpaghettiO swimming in regret. And rivers of blood threatened to drown the sadness in alcohol. I struggled to understand exactly why porridge tasted like misery and iron, only to realize marshmallows are not as squishy or real as advertised. I demanded a refund and got attacked by a man and a Karen that were sewn together. "Marshmallows are life," I shouted, until I peed a little, exposing my incontinence. The Karen creature stalked forward, on top of slugs slathered in self-righteous spunk, with a craving of hounds and sperm sex, as Karens do. "Release the kraken of drunken midgets." "Charge!" cried a voice, and all at once the heavens and hell said to me,
"Your time has come. Claim your candy cane's bath and become."
The Mandingo licked supple apples and drank vomit to quench his insatiable lust of banana hammocks. Jaded memories slowly fade into erotic dreams, tainted with violence. I craved a spanking, and sorrow washed my furberries with acid, causing me to yearn for psychosis. Be the infant in battle. Gird your loins, lest the midgets desire their low-hanging fruits. Leave behind skid marks to commemorate life. I sang Rhinestone Cowboy. The words was mutilated by my garbled yodeling. They echoed off the magnificent scrotum. Meat Pie suggested, like a bat out of hell, the grannies bolted, each wielding diamond swords and fuzzy slippers, laying waste to zombie ninjas with rainbow pajamas. Destiny awaits those brave enough to fart in public and drink death to the glory of the teabagging elder gods. Ashy knuckles remind me of the glory hole and many orifices of past victories. "Hail all to boiling flesh," he exclaimed. "Appreciate my majestic chest hair, knave." I woke up to find myself in a haze that I could not quite shake. I had clearly been here a while as my muscles started to cramp when I tried to shift my body. Further proof was that I could feel how tight my skin was from laying in the blazing sun. I laid there for a bit, hoping that the haze would pass, but after no luck, I decided to open my eyes. That was a horrible mistake. Immediately, the sun felt as though it were trying to fry my eyes. I snapped them shut and dropped my head back to the ground. The moment my head came in contact, I became aware of this pain in my head that was so intense, I was certain my skull was split open. I gently ran my fingers over my scalp, trying to understand how bad it was, when I felt my cold matted hair that seemed to flake when I rubbed it between my fingers. Somehow, I knew immediately it was dried blood. With that realization, the haze started to clear a bit and I began to try to focus on smaller things. I could feel grass under my fingertips. I could hear a babbling water, like a creek was nearby, and the chirps of many birds. This was all very confusing.
"Where am I?"
I muttered to myself. My voice sounded very odd to my ears.
"Why don't I recognize my own voice?"
This was all too overwhelming. I tried to open my eyes, this time slowly, but the sun still forced me to barely squint out of one eye. Looking around as best as I could, I only saw trees and the top half of what appeared to be a horse carriage. This was even more confusing as I was certain that I lived in the city, right? I shook my head slightly, like a rehearsed reaction trying to clear the fuzz from my head, but it didn't help. I finally decided to just relax a bit longer, trying to remember where I was and what I was doing here, wherever here was. Almost absently, I started moving my hands around the grass when my fingers brushed along something hard. I gently laid my fingers on it, uncertain of what it was. It was almost round and felt very smooth. After a moment or two, I decided it felt like lacquered wood, so I settled my hand more firmly onto it. Immediately, I could almost sense that it was a handle, so I took it in hand. As I did, I felt more of the haze start to clear, but I still could not remember where I was or what had happened. I let the wood drop from my grip and just relaxed to allow myself more time to recover. I laid there for a while longer until I was able to finally open my eyes all the way. Now I could see the beautiful blue sky, the treetops swaying in the wind, and the sun was starting to slip away. Closing my eyes again, I slowly sat up, quickly dropping my head and tucking it into my chest as the wound on my head exploded in pain, but quickly faded to the sharp throbbing I was becoming accustomed to. I sat there for a bit before trying to move or even open my eyes, as I was afraid I would pass out from the pain. I eventually, ever so slowly, lifted my head and slowly opened my eyes. At first, I wasn't sure what I was looking at. I saw these pools of thick, dark red ooze all over. Something inside me seemed excited, but I also knew this wasn't right. As I continued to look around, I started to become terrified, as the realization of what I was seeing was starting to sink in. I had been laying on a road that appeared to be slightly overgrown, which suggested that it wasn't used often. I found this to be odd. I could not hear or see any other people except those that were littered in front of me, at least the parts of them that I could see. I saw what appeared to be body parts strewn all over the road, some in the wagon, some even nearby me. I knew now that the pools of red ooze were blood. There was so much blood. I could see bloody hands, feet, legs. There were bones that I could not recall the names of, clumps of scalp, heads with no bodies, and at least one torso with no limbs. I was shocked.
What happened here?
The question barely escaped my lips. My heart started to beat faster and harder the more I looked. The haze fully lifted now as I looked at this horrid scene before me. I could not understand what I was doing in a place like this, with so much savagery. I felt a tear slip from my eye as I continued to survey the area. I slowly got to my feet and started to walk around, trying to take it all in. I still wasn't sure what I was doing here or what had happened to me, but I was coming to an odd peace at this horror I was seeing. In fact, I was starting to feel excited, I guess. I suppose my excitement was coming from a need to flee, to get to safety. No, that didn't feel right. Maybe I'm worried that whatever did this might return and try to finish me off? No, that wasn't sitting right either. Honestly, the excitement was confusing me. It almost felt like I am excited about what I'm seeing, but any normal human being would be horrified at this sight, disturbed, disgusted even. I started to agonize over why this sight wasn't bothering me more, but also feared the reality of understanding why. So I pushed those thoughts to the side and my gaze was drawn back to where I had been laying. There, on the ground next to where I had been, was the smooth lacquered handle, which I could see now was an axe. The metal head was coated in dried blood and hair. My hand absently moved to my head, delicately touching my scalp again. I finally understood what had given me the wound. I slowly made my way to where the axe was still laying on the ground. I had hoped that feeling the handle on my hands would spark some memories of the event that led me here. I carefully bent down to pick it up. I took the axe by the handle. I held it, turned it over in my hands, looked it over, but no memory surfaced. However, deep inside, I felt a small twinge that slowly turned into elation. Again, more feelings that confused me.
Damn it.
I let out a heavy sigh and dropped the axe to the ground. I was about to sit down, but noticed some blood splatters that seemed to be different than the rest. The blood that was all around had been in pools or smears, but this blood appeared to be large droplets, and a lot of them. A few inches away, I saw more of the same. A little bit further, even more. I realized that these drops were in a straight line that headed into the woods. As I started to follow the trail of blood, a bright gleam caught my eye. I looked at the source and could barely make out the tip of a shiny object. I started to walk towards it when a sudden dizzy spell caused me to lose my balance and fall face first into the ground. The sudden jar caused the pain in my head to explode again and I let out a yelp.
Oh.
I laid there for a moment, but curiosity got the better of me and decided to crawl to the shiny object that I had seen. As I inched closer, I was starting to see what appeared to be a gun, which didn't make sense as I didn't know anyone with a gun. Actually, come to think of it, I don't remember anyone. This threatened to overtake my senses, but again I pushed the screaming voice in my head down and crawled on. Once I made it, I sat up slowly, sitting on my backside, and stared at the gun for a bit. I got back to my feet, again slowly, but before standing all the way up, I plucked the gun from the ground. Once fully erect, I could see that the grip had inscribed initials.
J.A.
I muttered.
Who is J.A.?
I looked around.
And what the fuck happened here?
I said quietly, frustration starting to set in. I looked back to the blood trail once again. Without conscious thought, my hand moved to my side, pulled back my long black coat, and slid the gun into a holster. I looked down, astonished. How the hell had I not realized it had been there the whole time?
Fuck me,
I said in amazement. My head swam, in part due to not understanding what had happened, but also now certain that the bash on my head had done some real damage. I was beginning to feel queasy and faint, so I figured I would rest a bit before seeing how far I could follow the blood trail. I moved to a shaded area and eased myself down to the ground, resting my back on a large oak tree. I leaned my head forward and rested my chin on my chest. Something told me that because of my head injury, I should not allow myself to sleep, so I was determined to stay awake. I looked up at the sun and figured I still had a couple hours before the sun would set. To occupy myself, I tried to piece together what the hell had happened. There were so many questions and so very few answers. As I started to think about the situation, I pulled the gun from the holster to look at the initials again.
Who the hell is J.A.?
I mumbled to myself. That's when it hit me.
Who the fuck am I?
I exclaimed loudly. I tried hard to remember who I was, where I grew up, how I came to be in this place, but there was nothing. It was as if I were a blank slate, only just waking from a coma. This thought sent my mind to 1,000 directions, and I let out an involuntary whimper. Another heavy sigh escaped and was about to place the gun on the ground in front of me when I noticed that there appeared to be one spent round. It was a revolver, so I could easily see that there were 5 remaining unfired bullets. To keep my mind from losing itself, I thought about what I had seen and what I could put together.
Okay, so I could potentially be J.A., who carries a gun, and apparently I was required to fire a single shot. I appear to have been bashed on the head with an axe, but for what reason, I don't know.
The next question came as a shock.
Did I kill that person? Or those people?
I asked myself quietly. That actually made my stomach a bit more queasy at that thought, so I did take a bit of comfort in that fact.
If I murdered them, did I also...
The words were hard to say.
Hack them to pieces?
Deep inside me, something screamed no, but at this point, I could not be sure. I had become so focused on these questions, I did not hear the approaching roar of horses' hooves beating the ground. My eyes became fixated on the trail of blood once again, and I started to rise and was going to follow the blood trail into the woods.
Maybe this is the blood of the person I shot.
Thinking to myself, I took the first step towards the woods, and I heard someone shout,
"Over here! I found him!"
The voice sounded like they were a good 50 feet away, so I didn't think they were talking about me, but I took no chances. Almost like an instinct took over, as quickly as I could, I moved into the tree line. There, I had lowered myself back down, my chest against the exact tree I had been leaning on, but now hidden on the opposite side of where the voice had come from. I laid there for what felt like an eternity, was about to move away from the tree when I saw the first flash of blue coming through the woods just on the other side of the road. I held my breath, in fear that even my breathing could alert whoever these people were. I laid against the tree, motionless as possible, and finally I saw them walk through the tree line. At first it was only a couple, then moments later a flood of blue coats followed. There must have been 20 of them. Even from this distance I could make out that they each had a shield on their chest. They were the police. I felt excited at first until I saw the reactions to the scene in front of them. Some of them could not hold their gag reflex and threw up where they stood. Others tried hard to hold back, but found themselves running a short distance before vomiting. Eventually, they were able to regain control of themselves and started walking over the scene. A few heads would pop up from time to time to search the tree line, but not seeing anything, would return to their investigation. After a few minutes, the same person called out,
"Did you find him?"
These words rang in my head, as I was certain that when I had first heard them, they yelled,
"Over here! I found him!"
Did I not hear them right? I couldn't be sure. Knowing that they were still looking for someone and seeing their reaction to the scene made me realize that if I had been the one that had done this, I would not be a welcome guest coming into their midst, especially right now. After a few more moments of watching and making sure that no one had been looking in my direction, I slowly pulled away from the tree and started to rise. When I had laid against the tree, I had not noticed the low-hanging branch, and so when I stood up, it brushed against the bash of my head. The touch caused me to yell out in pain, which immediately alerted the police. After a moment, I finally got myself under control and turned around and started to run as fast as I could. The pain in my head once again made me dizzy, and I knew that I wasn't moving near quick enough to evade my pursuers. I was about to take another step when my vision became blurry for a split second, and just before darkness took me, I heard the same voice yell,
"Detective!"
I woke up to a policeman on each side of me. Immediately my heart began to pound, my mouth went dry, and my blood ran cold. As I forced myself to calm down, I realized I was now in a bed, but my arms were bound to the bedside. I struggled against the restraints momentarily when I realized the effort caused too much pressure on my head, which threatened to cause me to black out again. Hearing the restraints, both policemen looked at me. I expected to see hatred and resentment there, but the looks were of relief. One of the officers walked away, and I heard him say,
"Detective, he's awake."
I recognized the voice as the same one from the woods. After a few moments, a woman walked in the room and looked at me hard, and then, with a slight twitch of her head, the officers left the room. She looked back at me with a more sympathetic look this time. The detective moved forward, stood close to the bed, and then bent over.
"You don't know who I am, do you?"
she asked softly. I shook my head no. After staring for a moment longer, she stood up.
"We were all too late in finding the killing grounds. We found the remains of 5 individuals, 2 adults and 3 children.
She shook her head in a way that looked a bit more like shame.
We have identified them all, and they were the same family. The brutal bastard started to remove their limbs while they were still alive. The sick fuck."
She became visibly upset at this point.
"They were moving to a new city, a new life, a new chapter, and we could not protect them."
The anger was seething from her now. She looked at me hard.
"Do you know whose fault that is?"
I made no effort to answer. What she had just said made me sad beyond reason. I could not understand what kind of monster would kill children in such a brutal and disgusting way. I started to weep silently.
"The motherfucker you have been tracking for 3 years, Detective Adler?"
She let out a heavy sigh.
"You got that son of a bitch, though, John."
Who? John? I don't understand,
I said helplessly.
"As best as we can tell, you finally caught up to him. There was a fight, and he hit you with that fucking axe."
She started to raise her voice, but paused a moment to collect herself before going on.
"Before you fell unconscious, you were able to get 1 clean shot to his stomach, right through that asshole's liver. He only made it about 20 feet into the woods from where you were."
So I didn't kill those people?
I asked, pleading.
"No, John, there's no telling how many lives you might have saved."
The air around me feels faint. The smell of freshly fallen rain on old cobblestone roads, as the glistening walls of the nearby homes struggled to stay out of the shadows, as the street lamps struggled to keep their flames. It was a summer evening in London, only the air was thick and difficult to breathe in. I looked around me as people passed by with their umbrellas. Women, men, and yes, even the foolish blokes happened to be crossing the street. This was just like home, only something about it was different and felt wrong. All of the people that passed by me were nothing but skin and bones and walked in silence, all except one. I was approached by a man who crossed the intersection. He happened to look in my direction, tip his hat, and say to me, "Good day, Mom." After that brief cut through the air, the thickness returned, the skies growing darker, the clouds growing thicker, and my sight became bleaker from the oncoming fog. The crowd moved away from me as the fog rolled in, the air growing even fainter. All of this seemed to be building up to the moment that shot me awake. The sound of a scream of bloody murder that could have carried on for ages shot me awake as my alarm went off, signaling to me that it was time to get up and head to work. This dream has happened more than once. It happened to me once before, and when it did, I shot awake the same way I did now, with sweat on my body and my heart racing 1,000 miles a minute. Everything in these dreams seemed to be haunting me, almost holding me prisoner within a house of horrors. I decided to break the standing ache I was feeling in my body and try to get up and get ready for work. I walked over to the bathroom and brushed my teeth when I noticed something very strange about and on my face. I looked up after spitting out the toothpaste and noticed my eyes were completely bloodshot, and that there was a speck of blood underneath my right eye. It was something that made my hair stand on end when I noticed it, but nothing that would discourage me from continuing on with my day. I shrugged it off and said aloud to myself,
Probably just cut myself in my sleep.
And went along with the rest of my day. I didn't sleep well, so I probably just hurt myself while I was fumbling in my sleep. It was a type of explanation I would default to in order to preserve my sanity, something that I would soon begin to question. I finished getting ready and made my way out to the bus so I could head off to work. All of the morbid thoughts going through my head about the dream seemed to linger with me, like a bad fog over my whole day. Just 2 blocks down, in cold blood, a young woman had her body torn to shreds, her blood painting the walls of the alley she was murdered in. I only caught a glimpse of the carnage as the bus went by, but the image stuck with me the entire day. The bus had to detour away, so as to keep the public from fully seeing the mess that was left on the bricks and asphalt. I noticed a speck of blood had remained on my wrist from this morning. I rubbed it off my skin and tried to pretend that it was nothing. I arrived at work and tried my best not to focus on the woman's body that I saw on the way to work. Part of her was covered by the investigation team, but I could still see part of her leg sticking out beneath a sheet. For some reason, a face came to my mind as I sat there on my office desk, trying to rationalize how I would know that woman's face. It was hard to focus on work, so I decided to look into the murder. I found her name and her place of work. What was odd was how the name of that woman seemed so familiar. I did some digging in my free time at my desk and found that the name was identical to the name of a woman who was murdered during the infamous Jack the Ripper case. Apparently, the name was identical to the first woman who was murdered. I started to get nervous as I noticed on the news that the woman who was murdered near where I live was also involved in sex work. I didn't exactly live in the most glamorous part of London, but still. A murder right near where I lived seemed too surreal to be able to shut out of my head, especially after being so close and the names of the 2 women being so similar. I dwelled on this for a bit before returning to my work and returned home to make dinner. On the way home, I noticed that the road near the alley was clear. I looked back at the alley to see if anything had been left behind, and saw the image of a woman in a pale white light at the edge of the alley. But when I blinked, my eyes in disbelief, she was gone. It's times like this that make me happy that I don't drive, lest I'd be rubbernecking on the road and end up hitting someone. I spend too much time in my own head, thinking about the things that could be done and the things that couldn't. For some reason, I felt a string of guilt tugging at me on my way home after having seen that woman's body. I could speculate as to what it was that was tugging at me, but I'm almost certain now what it probably was. I went to sleep that night thinking about the woman and about what I needed to get done tomorrow at work. I thought I would sleep lighter that night, but I didn't. The same dream happened again, only this time, the man who waved at me tried to walk past me without saying anything. When I noticed him in the crowd, I started moving, walking, and then running towards him to chase him down. He began to hasten his pace, almost always seeming to be out of reach. He turned an alley, and right as I was about to chase him down the alley, I woke up, dazed and with more blood on my body. It happened again, and there was no mistaking the pattern this time. I cleaned up and made my way down to work, seeing a detour away from the regular road to another one as we passed by another crime scene, about 5 blocks away from where I live. These seemed too close for comfort. That was 2 women gone. I checked the name of the woman who was found murdered earlier, and sure enough, it was the same name as the second woman murdered in the Jack the Ripper case. The pattern was forming in my head at this point, but I was afraid to accept the implications. I had to try and shut it out of my head until I could fall asleep and try and confront the man I kept seeing in my dreams. If only I knew how to stop him sooner. I spent most of the day researching how to lucid dream and went to work trying to induce more lucid dreaming that night, and found myself able to move much faster and could speak in my dream. I always felt trapped in that dream, but now I was able to move. I had practiced mentally for this moment, and here he was, just a little bit away from me. This time, my intentions were clear. I wanted to catch this man and stop him before something worse happened. I didn't know yet why I needed to, but I knew that he was somehow connected to the murders. He moved faster this time, almost inhumanly. He knew I wanted to stop him, but right as I turned a corner to follow him down the alleyway, all but a card remained on the ground. I picked it up, and all it said was,
"Nice try, sweetie. Perhaps another time we shall meet."
I had missed him another time, a fatal mistake I couldn't continue to repeat. I woke up the next morning covered in more blood, parts of my bed coverings having been turned a shade of reddish brown from the dried blood. I went to my laundry supplies and pulled out the bleach and quickly tried to wipe away as much as I could before I went to get showered up and dressed. I was in such a frenzy trying to get ready for work that I almost ran into the police who came to knock on my door. They stopped me to ask me a few questions. I didn't have any answers for them that they were looking for, and I didn't have time to stay and talk to them for long. So I did my best to cut it short and ran to catch the bus. This time, an entire section of the road leading to work was cut off, so the bus had to take a detour around back so I could reach a stop near work. I wasn't sure if I saw it, but I was almost certain that I saw a phantom of a woman standing by my building. I blinked in disbelief and she vanished. Too much of this felt surreal to me. I had to get to the bottom of this and try to stop this being in my dreams so the killings could stop too. I checked one last time to make sure the name of this new murder victim shared the same name as the name of the same victim from the Jack the Ripper case, and sure enough, it was. This was the fourth death, and her blood must have been what was coating my hands and face. To think that I slept in a bed full of blood of a young woman, trying to chase down a phantom in my dreams. I was sent home early due to concerns from the police about the killer being in my building. If only they had known who to be looking for, I would probably be in handcuffs right about now. Oh well, it gave me the time necessary to focus on my plan for lucid dreaming that night, and gave me the motivation I needed to get to sleep as early as possible, so I would have as much time as possible to chase this man down, stop him, and stop the killing. I got home and worked on meditating to the point I would fall asleep, and, after what felt like hours of sitting there, I finally did. I ended up in the same dream, at the same street intersection, with the light rain coming down, only now, the man didn't cross the road. Instead, he turned around and began running the opposite direction away from where he had always been heading. I hastened my pace and began to exaggerate myself within the dream, to the point where my legs felt longer and my pace moved faster. I had him on the run, but this time, he wasn't going to escape. I was warping my dream, my reality to my will in order to chase him down, and, this time, I managed to finally catch him and pin him to a wall as he tried to head down an alleyway. He immediately pulled a large knife out of his coat pocket and tried to slash at me, but I wasn't about to lose him this time. He started to taunt me.
"You care for a game of cat and mouse, my dear?"
I was tired of his running, his fighting, his killing. I needed to end this. I imagined a blade in my hand and swung at him, watching as the cloth of his sleeve was sliced open with the blade in his attempt to dodge a slash at his center. He chuckled and started to wildly flail his blade at me, aiming to spear me with the point of his blade. I moved with superhuman speed to avoid the steel. His chuckles turned to sinister laughter.
"Ha ha ha ha! You are still weak, my dear. I thought you would be stronger."
I knew I had to end this, but there was only one way I could think of ending it. I took a gamble and bone rushed him, aiming for his heart. Our blades sliced through air thicker than flesh, both of our blades making contact. His blade sliced my left arm open, while mine ended up being pinned in his chest. His body crumpled beneath the force of my thrust and pinned to a wall. I let go and watched him collapse onto the ground, chuckling. I demanded an answer.
Why are you doing this? Why do I keep waking up to corpses and blood in my bed?
He chuckled as blood began to gargle in his mouth. All he told me as he looked up at me, his face fully visible now, was this.
"Blood thicker than water, my dear. Blood thicker than water."
And with the light fading from his eyes, the clouds in the dream cleared, the rain stopped, and I woke up one last time. I checked myself for blood, but saw none this time. I was so relieved to see that the blood was not there for once. Something seemed strange about my room though, and I decided to check my old family photos as the box was out of my closet and was sitting next to my bed. I looked through them at my old family tree and turned pale as I saw what appeared to be a portrait of the same man from my dream. It was then I saw the same blade the man used on my nightstand, stained with blood, and a note next to it. The note read clearly on it the same words the man spoke to me. Blood runs thicker than water, my dear. Blood runs thicker than water. I finally realized what all of this meant, and what that man meant by blood runs thicker than water. The man in my dream I kept seeing in my dreams was no ordinary man, and I am no ordinary woman. I suppose the saying is true. There ain't no rest for the wicked.